Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this talk. I don't know if you were here yesterday, but I'm going to do a little bit of some repeat. So if you notice like a slide or anything, from yesterday, it's just to tie it into this theme that has a lot more to do with like ET government treaties and more of the interaction between extraterrestrials and our governments and stuff like that. But it also, ties in some of the things I couldn't share yesterday. So, and if you weren't here yesterday, hopefully it'll make sense. So it's not like a part two. It's just to make sure that those that didn't come yesterday get a little bit of that as well. So thank you, and to all the organizers and all the tech help and everybody that came. It's definitely like information you don't hear every day. And I always encourage people to just take what resonates, of course, and discard whatever doesn't. This is my website. I have a podcast. And I have a full calendar, so with subscribers, normally I'll help you to get into a session earlier than what you might see on the calendar. And I do, podcasts and interviews, and also a call-in astrology radio show. And I get your data before you call. And then when you call in, you just give me your name, I have your data, and I can answer any questions. And I do a couple a week. When my travel schedule lightens up, I'll do more. So anyway, there's that. And I talked a little bit about where I got my research from. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but mostly life experience, just the soul journey. I mean, that to me is like enough of an education if you're really paying attention to the things that are happening around you. And so, yeah, being born in the Eisenhower family just was quite kind of an education of, okay, well, why am I here? What purpose do I serve in this, family? And clearly, after you see the presentation, it's probably to talk about stuff that nobody really talks about in our family for reasons that I'll explain that have to do with the hidden ufology, ET, government treaty type stuff, and things like alternatives 1, 2, and 3 that relate to possible doomsday scenarios and what we would need to do in the event of those events taking place. Whistleblower testimony and research, obviously there's a lot of whistleblowers out there, a lot of researchers out there, so I pay attention to what they're saying and see how it ties into the things that I know. I have a degree in science, the wilderness expedition leadership stuff. I've studied mythology and gotten into like the esoteric and tarot and astrology. Been doing that for about 20 plus years. And, I always run into things that help me to connect dots regarding Keylontic science, and then Ascension Glossary from Lisa Renee, and her website is there. So it's a really good website to check out if you're curious about a lot of the stuff I'm bringing forward or some of the terminology. She's a great go-to person, and I always found myself running into her information when I was trying to make sense out of everything. Probably the only time you'll see me take a breath for the rest of this whole thing. But I'll try. So I brought this up earlier because I just want to kind of start with the framework of our DNA and unraveling the DNA, so it's not just like this thing that we see in a picture, something that we understand through just maybe a limited scientific perspective. There's obviously energy and frequency connected to our full 12-strand capacity. So when we look at the 3D human matrix, it's basically just limited to a programming. Obviously, we're more than just this 3D realm that we've been programmed to believe we're in, particularly in this window period because the vibration of the planet's changing, and I'll go into a little bit of that, which I did yesterday. But so we're limited to the personality matrix. In the personality matrix, if we're cut off from the rest of ourselves, it's very easily mind controlled because we're taught at a very young age to develop a sense of self-worth, not based on our own gifts and abilities or awareness, but normally how we achieve good grades or please, authority figures. And, there's social engineering agendas that we might feel pulled to have to answer to or do very well in order to feel good. And like we have, a successful life. And a lot of us have sort of fallen through the cracks and we're just like, it's just not going to work out. And so, then you're thrown labels, you're crazy. Maybe teachers told you you had learning disabilities or you're an outcast and it's just not working out. It's just not working out. And then you find friends that agree and then you talk about this kind of weird stuff and then you come together realizing this is like groundbreaking stuff for the planet. to be able to open our minds to all the different information that's out there from many, many different sources. And it gives us a whole nother level of education and helps us to recognize that some of these other levels that we've been existing on are really important for us to honor and appreciate, even though the personality matrix might not appreciate it or might want to cut us off from it or medicate it or project upon it just to keep us locked into, no, we're supposed to be following this particular trajectory as humans. And so the mind control, the digression of, humans, I mean, if we see, obviously health has been a huge issue, survival issues have been a huge issue for us, lots of injustices, and then we learn about junk DNA, which is basically these other levels, that's considered junk. But because it's all scrambled and the codes are scrambled, we don't really see what it looks like when it's actually organized. And what it actually is it takes us into the 4th, 5th, and 6th strand, 7th, 8th, and 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, so the full strand DNA capacity, which also links to the Trinity, which would be dimensions 13, 14, and 15. But sometimes it makes it somewhat impersonal to just throw numbers at it. But we can look at the Trinity, not to challenge people's belief systems, but as like mother, father, child would be daughter, son, and then, the Holy Spirit energy of spirit, which some would say has a feminine energy, but to me it's, always about the balance of the masculine and feminine. And that's how we heal our DNA, is finding that balance in our energy field. We get confused with the gender part of it or sexual preferences, and it's so much more than that. So, a lot of us existing in the soul matrix, I mean, we all experience that too, because we seek soulmates or we maybe make good friends, and we know that we exist beyond the personality matrix when we're with them, when we get to know people a little bit more, and that's how we help ourselves to, go further, when we can live on a much deeper level. But very often we run into these things that took place in our galactic history, like when we start to move into those layers, relationships get attacked, relationships are targeted, friendships can even be targeted. The whole concept of unity is targeted. That's why we see a lot of difficulty in, certain communities coming together. There's maybe a plant or an infiltrator or some sort of, agenda somebody might be coming in with to, create this conquer and divide mentality so that we don't advance ourselves. And so 4, 5, and 6 has a lot to do with our 5th chakra, our throat chakra, how we communicate. Are we emanating the mind control, or are we speaking truth? If we're speaking truth, we can help activate one another. So when we exist on a soul level, then we sort of relive some of these things. And when we relive something, we have the opportunity to finally overcome it for good. So if you find yourself feeling targeted when you enter the soul level, or your relationship, feeling targeted, it's just a matter of just recognizing the game and manipulation. And so the 4, 5, and 6 isn't that difficult because it's still within the 7 chakra system we've been taught. So we reach those levels a lot, especially through meditation, and different tools and modalities can help us. Most important thing is integrating it into the physical plane. And to do that means we're willing to leave toxic relationships, maybe a job we hate, and we're willing to change our lifestyle accordingly so that it is more of a container for these other energies to be able to express itself through, instead of bouncing back and forth between higher and lower self. Because we do that a lot. We'll go up and we'll go down again, and we'll live sort of this, okay, here's my human world, and then this understanding, and there's sort of a contradiction. So this is kind of the full kind of DNA thing, and each layer, each harmonic universe, because every single little bullet point holds a different harmonic universe. The lower one's harmonic universe 1, then we got 2, 3, 4, 5 harmonic universes, which is interesting because the 5 points of the pentagram is very significant. Inverted, it's definitely like the dark sort of satanic symbolism. When it's upright, it shows the circulation of the 5 elements, including the ether, which is now available, which helps us to activate the rest. So when we go into 7, 8, and 9, the Orion Wars influenced it and digressed it. We lost contact with that because the 7th chakra is supposed to take us further. And the crown chakra is very important, but it's taking us somewhere. It's not just limiting us there. But we've been taught to just open our crown, and when we start to move beyond all that, sometimes, again, something comes in and wants us to not go further, to reach that avatar matrix. And that's actually where the Lyran Wars and the explosions took place that threw us into this. So as we reclaim all of it, we're a lot more protected, and our spiritual immune system is far more shielded, because we've been there, done that. And it's hard to have like a repeat when we hold that kind of ancient trauma. So anyway, we're in a time of recognizing the importance of bringing balance back to this earth, becoming more aware of our DNA connection with the earth grids, and how our chakras connect us with the multidimensional cosmos. the micro-macro connection we are waking up to, and it's helping us to really see how we can harness our creative power to make positive change on this earth. So harnessing our creative power is really recognizing that all the stuff streaming in, whether it's cell towers, whether it's our phones, whether it's the television, hold on, I'm just missing somebody in the audience. That's okay. We don't need him. It's just my husband. No. I think he's monitoring something. Anyway, so harnessing our creative power to make positive change on Earth, our creative channels are very vulnerable to infection. So that's what, like, propaganda, stuff from the media, social engineering, it just gets in there, and then we enable the things we don't want. The minute we buy into something or believe in something, it starts to stream through our creative channels, and it becomes something that we generate or manifest into the environment. And so harnessing our creative power is really taking the time to clear it and make sure that it's only connecting with our own divine instructions and our own, just greater abilities. Because when we connect in with that, I mean, that's what magic is, really. And I'm not talking like ritualistic magic, manipulative magic, but just the magic of connecting with something higher that our creative channels and nervous system picks up on, because the nervous system is a great conduit to then generate it into the environment. So all we have to do is just recognize, if we're attaching to something and we're noticing something manifest that is less than favorable, we just need to recognize, is there something that needs to be cleared? Because pretty much everything we manifest is based on something that's attached itself to our creative energy, or it might be a locked trauma that's inside our nervous system that is like on sort of a repeat through like the fight or flight response to any kind of trigger. And I know we all know what those triggers are like. And yeah, it's kind of like being a trigger-free like person is like getting rid of like termites. You know how they put the big tent on the house? It's like, I'm trigger-free. It's like, I'm not trigger-free yet, but I'm definitely working on it. It's just like, it's like, oh. And it's like you relive it, but it gives us the opportunity. So on a larger level, as we go on this like path of ascension, we relive a lot of stuff in our past, and there's a lot that is kind of watching and monitoring, making sure that when we have those collective triggers, that some big false flag will happen to throw us into like apocalyptic traumas, because we hold memories of exploded planets and a lot of like advanced civilizations collapsing, and it just causes us to relive that, and then we are in fear, and then we are looping again. And so we have to just kind of break that barrier, because in this particular window period, that is not going to happen. But artificial timelines and false Armageddon scenarios can be generated and created to cause us to lock into it and actually manifest something that we don't need to experience. Because if we're in a free will universe and it's been this game of lost and found, and we've gained the wisdom, we know how to not have that happen. We've learned the right use of power. We've experienced, a lot of these different scenarios in past lives. And so this is why this window period is so prophesized, because this is a time where we can consolidate all those experiences and say, okay, now I get it. And we've been manipulated, so in a lot of ways we've always gotten it, but we never knew that we would be this attacked and this limited and this messed with, because we're born with amnesia, so we don't really remember. We can't just trace it back. We just kind of wake up and we just play human, and we think this is just what being human is, but we're just like functioning like on such a small level. So due to explosions or cataclysms that made certain planets uninhabitable in our solar system, such as the planets Tiamat, which is a 5D planet in the harmonic universe of Tara, and Maldek, which is blew up in this particular sector of the galaxy. Our planet has been used as a relocation destination for beings referred to as refugee races, that were beings that have been displaced from their own planet because of an event of destruction on their planet. So, this is a lot of research, everyone from Corey Goode to Michael Saul, just a lot of different researchers that I mentioned in the beginning that I want to, call out. It's in my own words, and I added a few things, but I just want to at least, share where I get some of my information along the way. So the relocation of other races on the Earth contributed to the hybridization of the original Earth human bloodlines, and it damaged the original DNA silicate matrix, effectively making it impossible for higher consciousness embodiment of the Christos Sophia, which is the masculine feminine template, and the highest expression of our DNA. So yesterday I talked about like DNA. The healing of DNA is really bringing together the masculine and feminine. And when we, rebuild these strands, and we understand that they're elementals, the nucleic acids are elementals, and we, allow ourselves the alchemy, it's really just taking us back to that balance. And so we can tell in our outer world if we're holding that balance. And it shows in our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with others. When we have those power struggles, when we notice, certain games being played or certain programmings like streaming through ourselves or the other person, then we come up with label, oh, you're a narcissist, or you're just being a blah, blah, blah. These personalities, sub-personalities that have been engineered through the personality matrix mind control to create a lack of accountability and to more create dysfunctional behavior patterns and personality disorders that people will not gladly admit that they have. And they'll just kind of act out, and then the rest of us have to roll our eyes and put up with that family member or that partner that you hope wakes up, including the fact that the individual that's noticing it might need to wake up and overcome a feeling of victim mentality. So it doesn't matter what your gender is, we have masculine and feminine within us, and they've both been compromised. And so that original embodiment of 12-strand and beyond got lost to us because that balance turned into a power struggle. And that's really what duality is. Duality is really a power struggle. Integration of polarity is being able to harmonize polar opposites. So when we look at an astro chart, if you look at the sign Aries, what's opposite it is the sign of Libra. Aries has to do with self and leadership and self-identity, but the opposite is partnership, Libra, balance. Connection with others. And so every time, I look at a chart, it's like I want to help a person integrate polarity. So if a person has 10 planets all next to each other in one part of the chart, which is great, shows that they probably have a lot of incredible talents and abilities, it's always good to help bring their energy and their attention to what's opposite so that they can, integrate the polarity. And very often they'll have an opposition or something that helps them do it. So our maps are, really just to help us to rebuild our DNA, and that's kind of how I look at it. Not every astrologer will see it that way. They'll maybe focus on career and love life, and I'm like, no, let's rebuild our DNA and get back to the 0 point. Because 12 strands of DNA, 12 houses of the zodiac, 12 hands on a clock, and all this 12, 12, 12 stuff. But 13 is kind of the key because that kind of phase locks it into something that isn't so vulnerable. Because if we had 12 strands in the Lyra system and still got attacked, even that level of embodiment was subject to digression. But when we, connect in with the Trinity, it gives us that extra shield and protection, and that separation of the masculine and feminine in that Trinity with these fallen races from these founder groups that seeded life in the time matrix, threw off that balance. And so we're just getting the balance back. So the refugee races began to interbreed with the Earth-based humans and organize forced breeding programs so that they could harness the advanced DNA. They were more than likely influenced by the dark controller groups to do such a thing. There were also higher races impacted in these explosions, but they weren't responsible for contributing to the destruction of those planets. The ones who were being swayed by the service to self-orientated ones were. So, we have existed on these exploded planets, right? So some might say, okay, there's intruder races, refugee races that have created this control system that are alien, but then there's a lot of us, though, that were on these exploded planets, but we're not service to self. And it's not like service to others means you negate yourself either. So, but the thing is, we're on a multidimensional planet, so she's connected to all these other higher star systems and also all these other planets as well. So I don't look at it like we don't belong here and we're just like an invading race and nature hates us and the alien, I just see it like we're part of this greater multidimensional Earth. We've been limited to a 3D programming, and when we move into this ascension energy and we wake up these dormant strands of DNA, we recognize that we're on a multidimensional planet that links us to these other places that we've been, that we're in higher harmonic universes that are connected to this Earth. So it's like the Earth has a higher self and a more sort of 3D self, but the 3D self is not her organic nature. That's the overlay of these mind control systems and also these dark technologies that were put in place to keep that alive. So when we look at dying races or hybridization programs or some of the abduction situations, it is to make up for this and to try and correct it. But it often has very self-serving purposes. We need to break free of this loop, which relies heavily on technology. And so higher guardian groups and races are assisting in this massive healing going on. But really, to me, it's like our higher self is assisting. So if we always look at beings outside of us and we don't recognize that it's a part of our multidimensional nature, then it's either we're going to be helped and saved or we're being screwed with and we're victims. But if we understand that the lower forms are trying to keep us in the personality matrix, which relies on us to have an unhealthy ego, whether it's we feel victimized or we feel, wanting power and making deals in order to get power to exploit the human race. It's playing with that part of ourselves, our sense of identity. And so if we want to overcome these, lower beings, it doesn't mean that we're targeted because we have ego issues. Normally it just wants to traumatize us enough to throw us into a place of survival. But everybody's got their own stories as far as why they might have an abduction scenario in their life, and I wouldn't want to define it in a general terms, because when I do sessions, a lot of people have different reasons, different agreements. So it's hard to just define it as one thing. But when I look at the lower races, they are trying to hook into our lower chakras or keep us in our lower chakras. When we look at the higher benevolent groups, guardian races that are assisting, it's our higher self also. I mean, obviously our higher self is assisting us. And it's connected to higher dimensional energies, which have these benevolent beings. And the whole idea, I think, is to bring the higher into the lower so that the lower emanates these higher principles and it begins to change the physical reality around us. Because if we can anchor and ground our wisdom nature and our higher, greater self, then we are able to heal. The environment begins to clear because we've taken care of our own inner elements, and the earth has no choice but to respond. Because to me, we're just, the outer world is a reflection of our soul and beyond. And that's why indigenous cultures understand like spirit medicine and herbs have we can be healed by the earth very easily with different herbs and spirit animals, and it is an outer reflection. We have earth, air, fire, water within us, and then we look outside of us. But then when we look at the elements on the earth, they're contaminated. And so we can tell deep down inside ourselves that we're kind of contaminated too. We're not always waking up like, woohoo! We got heaviness in our emotional bodies, and sometimes it's hard to think clearly because our skies are being sprayed. So, the assault we're the product of, but we're also the victory when we refuse the mind control. We do our best to take care of ourselves, and we don't buy into the program. Because none of these toxins or even heavy metals and the agendas would have an impact on us if we didn't buy into the programming. Because if it was just enough to spray us and assault us with these things, then we wouldn't have the TV programming, we wouldn't have the social engineering. But they need us to buy the bait to keep us in a low density so that our bodies aren't able to alchemize these assaults. But when we move into higher dimensional thinking and we're in our heart center and we're in these kind of higher dimensions, the physics is different and we can actually alchemize and transmute a lot of these things that get into our system. So it's kind of like a frequency battle and a war on consciousness. So as long as we can keep our consciousness clear, the physical will respond and it can actually handle a lot more than we realize. But of course, when we're exhausted, when we're tired of being attacked, when we don't have people around us that we can talk to and we feel isolated, that alone, even if we're awake, can make it tough too. So, yeah. So we as humans are undergoing a slow evolution to reassemble DNA, which was damaged and manipulated in many galactic wars, resulting in exploding planets. Cataclysms also impacted our DNA, negative technologies and genetic modification and implants as well. So, yeah, exploding planets, if we were on that planet, we have experienced that trauma of these explosions, and so our consciousness is fragmented by those memories, and so we are trying to pull all our pieces back. And we're able to do that with each other because we all carry different zodiac maps, and so we meet certain people for certain reasons to help give us something that we might be lacking. Even though it's there, it's just dormant, so we can help switch the lights on for others. And I was talking about this yesterday. It's like you can have a person that's really out there that's having a hard time coming into their body because they're floating off in like the avatar matrix, but they can't get in the physical because the physical, the density is so difficult that sometimes certain people just cannot ground or get in there. And other people are like, yeah, I've been here, done this a while. I know how to put my feet on the ground and function as a human. But have an open mind, and then you put the two together and you help to rebuild the DNA. And so that's why unity consciousness is important. It's not just like love and harmony, let's all get along. It's like we're sharing codes, we're sharing different things to help to rebuild one another. Because once that's all switched on, the zodiac doesn't matter as much. It's just a map showing us, okay, here's the strengths, these are some challenges, and more than likely the synchronicities in our lives will bring us to people that will help us to awaken, and also ones that will want to keep us trapped in our weaknesses, looping in our negative patternings. And that's more because we have both options coming at us, just like when we injure ourselves. We have just as much of a chance of having an infection as we do having something heal, but we have to nurture a wound. If we don't nurture the wound, it's subject to possible infection. And so same thing with our life. When our life gets injured, say through divorce or a loss of a job or some sort of family drama, and we walk around after that, we can feel pretty thrown. And we'll either notice things that are preying upon us and things that are exacerbating it and making it worse, and making us literally feel like we're living in hell. Or we'll notice, powerful synchronicities, maybe something jumping out from a bulletin board, like a great workshop or, a group meeting or a support group or something that can actually help. So there's always two options of something that wants to help us to heal and something that is going to reinforce maybe the feeling of defeat or victimization that can just, further loop us in a trap. And I've been really good at experiencing what that's like. And I'm like, maybe I have other options. And then the self-worth thing is like, well, do I even deserve that good thing? Should I even bother healing, So we mess with our own heads sometimes. So after all these cataclysms, the planet Earth tilted on its axis, which damaged all the planetary gates, planetary grid networks, the portals and stargates on the planet. All the pyramids and ET technology disconnected and went offline. Flooding and cataclysm destroyed the Atlantean colonies and much of the Earth's surface. And this timeline is also referred to as the Atlantean flood. I mentioned this also yesterday, so there are some repeats. But planetary gates, planetary grid networks, the portals and stargates are basically our chakras and our DNA. So if that's damaged on the Earth, and we're veiled and quarantined from the rest of ourselves, and we're going to be born, and through osmosis, we're going to pick up on all that. So whatever little baby came in all pure, it's just like, oh, let's put the shots in them and stick them in front of the television and have them watch Sesame Street and go to school and like have to listen to the teacher, and it's just like we're assaulted right away. And I'm not saying all of it's bad, because there's so many well-intentioned, beautiful people within these structures that we might feel limited by, that we all might have worked for, maybe still work for. It doesn't matter. The beauty is if you're a compassionate and loving soul, it doesn't matter where you are, who you work for, you're making a difference to the people that are around you. Because we can't just wake up avatars tomorrow morning, right? So we can go into those zones, but for the body to actually be able to match what our consciousness should hopefully eventually hold consistently is going to take a little while. So there is a lot of importance behind a lot of these, things. Just hopefully, people aren't falling into the trap of like just doing it for money, manipulating people just for money. Because that is, to me, just, you never exploit a human for your own benefit. But there are a lot of people, in these industries, whether it's medical or school systems or even politics, that really, really want to see positive change and really, really do care. And so I never, when I bring up, the matrix stuff, mean to bust on the whole system. I want to, empower the really well-intentioned people that are in them, because they're going to change them. You got to change it from the inside out. Sometimes you got to be in it to be able to change it and notice what's going on and call it out. And I know a lot of doctors and nurses and people that have seen things firsthand and are trying to create change. So it's really the individual that can, change it. It's not like we can knock it all down and rebuild. It's going to be a slow transformation from the inside out, bringing in more like healthy approaches, maybe more holistic approaches. But yeah, it really comes down to the individuals. But yeah, I mean, we can't, all of a sudden be able to, fix everything that's been damaged, that has caused us damage, except for know that this window period is actually doing it for us. And I'm going to get into like what's actually happening on a cosmic and earthly level that is initiating this sort of healing and change, which takes a lot of pressure off of us, because it's like, what do we do? Like, how do we fix all this? Because that's pretty like gnarly. Well, the earth is a consciousness being. So of course she is going to want to heal herself, right? And of course, when I say she's always connected with the masculine, it's always about the balance. I'm never like into one gender overriding the other. It's a dance, and that's the polarity integration. But this is why this window period has been so prophesized, because this is a time of healing what these cataclysms have done. So if the earth tilted on its axis, well, it's just like if we're in a car accident, maybe we're like off, maybe our spine is off, maybe something's been injured, our head, over time, we're eventually able, to come back into alignment, and that's where we are right now. But of course, dark agendas are going to want to trick us out of being in alignment, and will feed us anything possible to convince us that this is actually not happening, and that we have to rely on what the news tells us as far as like where we're going as a human race, and how to solve all these particular problems on a 3D level. And I don't think we're going to have to solve these problems on a 3D level. But as long as we wake up here, we might as well, you know, have our attention on it, but not to the point of forgetting a much larger picture. So when the Sumerian Egypt invasion began, this event unplugged human DNA and scrambled the fire letters and the geometric codes in the planetary morphogenetic fields, which blocked higher sensory perception and thus blocked multidimensional perception of other timelines and extra-dimensional races. And so again, that's very projected upon. If you're kind of floating out of your body and going into other zones, like in the classroom, you're going to be sent to the counselor's office, and they're going to call your mom because they're all worried about you, and they're going to want to put you on medication because you're drifting off into some other place. Yeah. So this is my childhood story, right? It's just like, but you know, be like, yeah, you know, she's really kind of out there, and I'm like, well, I'm busy, I'm working. Like, I know I look like I'm out in space, but I'm actually, you know, like doing things. Yeah. So we access that a lot, especially as children, but it's just, you know, obviously the programming is to keep us disconnected from it and to make it like, you know, a problem. And you know, that block is very much what humans choose to uphold as authority figures. So the energy is available, we were born with it, so it's not so much the technologies, it's what the technologies have done to the mind control. And so a lot of it is, yeah, you know, being responsible and being disciplined and having, you know, some sort of order. You know, rules aren't bad, but it went a little too far, I guess you could say, because there's not a whole lot of, you're not going to go, I mean, I call myself a global alchemist, and that wasn't what my guidance counselor said that I would be as a grown-up. I had only a few choices, teacher, doctor, you know, it's like, so you know, I just like, well, I'm just going to come up with it myself. And it's something we're all doing. Obviously, we're creating some kind of global alchemy to turn the lead of this human experience into gold. And we're all doing this. So just wanted to give it a voice. So during the Atlantean cataclysm about 26 to 30,000 years ago, this is when the planetary stargates and grids and ley lines became controlled by negative ET races. So I'm not a big fan of the word negative, but when we look at negative, it's just service to self. It's like, how do we harvest energy? How do we use energy for our own benefit? And they compromise their DNA on purpose to be the controllers, because there was these rebellions against just the source energy, because we're in a free will universe. In a free will universe, the first thing that usually comes up is, what is this power? You know, and what can we do with this power? What can we get away with? You know, kind of like a kid, like, what can I get away with? So it depends on the parent. You're going to put them in timeout. Well, you know, some kids, you put them in timeout, they open the window and run out the door. So it's like, it's just the nature of a free will universe is to play with the idea of power. So really, all these different lifetimes that we live, if you believe in reincarnation, is to learn the right use of power. Because power is like our solar plexus, it's our own personal power, but then there's a greater power, the regenerative power of nature, the power of the cosmos. And these alignments is what rebuilds our DNA and unscrambles the fire codes. Because we've been limited with just ego power. How can we make a lot of money? Who can we exploit? Who can we take advantage of? Oh, well, they're weak and so they deserved it. That's BS. You don't take advantage of people, because vulnerability is a beautiful thing. Being sensitive is a beautiful thing. You don't take advantage of those people. And even though it's a free will universe and they're able to, well, those that have been taken advantage of are wisening up, and they're understanding the game being played. And so when they have nothing to feed on anymore, what's going to happen to them? So it's really, they're going to be in the compromised position. And they're lucky that a lot of us are still willing to forgive and open our hearts, because we're right on the cusp of a lot of those powers just being in a really desperate place, like not having its food source because they lost connection with true source. So we're either on a trajectory of becoming ascended masters again, or whatever you want to call it, becoming the advanced beings, because our physical body is coded with the ability to become that. Even if we leave the physical and go into another form or take it with us and blip into another dimension, this is what we're designed to do. The other option is to digress and then end up having to abduct to get genetic information to make up for those choices that caused digression, maybe enhancement of the intellect, but loss of soul, loss of emotion, and stuff like that. So they thought emotion was an issue, but usually when you have an artificial moon or something manipulating emotions, yeah, emotions are an issue. But how about get rid of the artificial moon so that we can actually be in our psychic awareness instead of the heaviness of emotional insanity, because, you know, we feel a lot and we're having all this crap beamed on us all the time. Sorry. So the Orion groups, the Draconian, became an ally to the Anunnaki resistance. So when we look at the Anunnaki, those who came from the sky, Anunnaki, there's different factions. There's very high vibrational ones that, like, you know, Danu and the tribes in Ireland and Their mythologies are really incredible. They're considered Anunnaki. And then you have just the darker factions that actually became an ally to the Draconians. And they decided to pull their control agendas together, called Black Suns and Sons of Belial. They're a fallen race known as Wanderers because they were these refugees from these planets, and they decided to become like a pirate ship on Nibiru and then, just kind of manipulate everything. They compromise their DNA to maintain control. They are Syrian reptilian hybrids, and they organize themselves into what is known as the intruder races of current times. And these beings are the ones who orchestrate the New World Order agenda and the highest factions of the Illuminati plan for Earth takeover. And so there's a lot of different races interacting. There's a lot of different control groups and agendas. And so there's a lot that's disguised to humanity to create this, idea of New World Order. And they didn't expect us to be where we are right now. We would have been a lot more compromised if we didn't see through certain things. And what's great is when there is a false flag in the news, just go on social media, like it's being busted and made fun of with memes. I mean, they can't get away with anything anymore without it just being completely ridiculed and completely torn apart, like right away. It's just like the Epstein thing. Even people that normally wouldn't be looking a little bit closer and deeper are just like, no, there's no way he committed suicide. And they're like, normally I'm not a conspiracy theorist, they would say, I've seen. But this is just ridiculous. So they keep shooting themselves in the foot because as things come to light, as disclosure, which is an awakening, which is seeing things that have been hidden, gets stronger and stronger, it's so much more obvious, the lies because the mind control is not working anymore. They had technologies that could only see up to 2012. That's why it was such an important time for these control agendas in the creation of their artificial timelines, is to put us in a further web around this period. But it didn't work. So, a ripple effect is happening, and we're in a really good place actually, because they didn't expect, this to get to where it has been. Because now, if they even wanted to chip us, there would be huge rebellions. I mean, they're just not allowed to really get away with it without seeing that the masses are not going to allow it. Even 5G, it's like they're taking it down in certain places because people are saying absolutely not. And so, because the people are allowed. It makes them look really bad for not answering to the people when they're supposed to be serving the people. And so those facades of making us feel that way, they can't do anymore because they can't ignore hundreds of thousands of people saying, no, don't do this. So it's just not really working. And every single false flag, even like architects and engineers for 9/11, the educated ones that went to school and learned this stuff is saying these events are impossible. There's just no way. And it's not even a conspiracy theorist. It's just not possible. If somebody is an expert in demolition, they'll say that's demolition. If somebody is an expert in like knowing how a plane would crash into a building and that building 7 just collapsed by itself, it's like it doesn't take a whole lot of brains to know that that's just impossible. Maybe at first we were all like, oh my gosh, and then it's like, I always tell them, especially with the trolls that they have and the things that they're trying to do, I'm like, you guys got to like get a better troll academy or instructors because you guys just suck. I mean, you're so obvious, like, and it's like, it's almost like we're just sitting here eating popcorn and laughing at you at this point, and they're just like, demons hate it when you laugh at them. So they're just like, man, we're supposed to be dumbing them down. And they're actually, they've created a monster. They've made us, very smart because, duping and facades and lies are such a low energy compared to the rest of who we are. And it's the same thing with, a relationship. Eventually it catches up if you're not going to be an honest person. So anyway, the Draconian Orion group are also referred to as the Black Suns. The Black Suns have reversed their DNA. It's a reverse 10 DNA strand running a reversal life current. And we can activate 12 strands and beyond, but they're trying to keep us from this and to keep us as a food source. They have a hierarchical system, and Earth-based reptilians appear to be in command over the EBEs, or biological entities known as the small grays. They access limited levels of biological immortality through the vampirism and siphoning of other living things such as planet Earth. So in 1926, so we hear about ET government treaties. Mostly if you Google on the internet, you'll probably only run into Eisenhower, who made a deal with the ETs, right? And when I first started researching, I'm like, okay, well, whoops, that's kind of sucks. Like, what happened there, But I'm like, I came into this family not to be biased, not to hide anything. I came here to expose as much as I possibly can. So I was doing presentations just about what I knew, what I had researched. Family wasn't talking about it. I remember being in line at the grocery store when I was like 10 years old, and there was a Weekly World News article that Eisenhower had met with ETs. But this is a joke newspaper, and I'm sure you guys know it, like Bat Boy took over New York City kind of paper. And But I'm sitting there looking at that headline. I'm like, this actually is, I think, a true story. And then I started to, I'm like, I just had this feeling that there are extraterrestrials, and Eisenhower met with them because he was sort of like connecting with me since I was a kid, just sort of like trying to prepare me like for all this kind of stuff. So anyway, in my earlier presentations, maybe about 10 years ago, I was mostly just talking about what I had found out, what I had known, what whistleblowers I could find. And I didn't have any of this information. But when you have this suspicion and you just don't stop until you feel appeased, it's sort of like, when you want seconds and you're just not hungry, like full, or you just keep following your nose. It's like there's always this nagging feeling like, no, keep going, keep digging. There's way more to this. And of course there is when we look at our galactic history in terms of extraterrestrials and the Anunnaki and this and that. But in terms of like when they started interacting with our governments were some huge questions. So I found out, not just from this source, but I can't quote everybody, but this one says, in 1926, the Zeta Zephylim began interacting with certain factions of several Earth governments. Several projects by Zeta Draco were intent on destroying Earth's grid vibration rate to stop us from evolving or ascending. The Zeta were involved with Atlantis and for a time with colonization of Mars. So Keylontic Science, Ashiana Dien, pretty profound stuff. I haven't like read all her books, and I'm not like, I don't follow, but when I like to connect dots and I run into information like this and I feel the resonance, and it's like, okay. And I know a lot of her material is very right on. So if the Earth's grid vibration is something that they're trying to manipulate and stop, and we're so connected to the Earth, that's also our vibration. So if they're tinkering with the stargates and the Earth grids, that's actually messing with our own chakras and our capacity to switch on our DNA. So if they can mess with the Earth, it automatically affects us, and pretty much vice versa, because obviously our DNA has been tinkered with, and there's abduction scenarios, there's implants, and there's frequency fences and seals that have been put in our DNA, so that when we start to advance ourselves, something just goes stop. And sometimes it's a psychic attack, sometimes it's just something that just like gets in our way and sabotages and pulls the carpet from underneath us. So we're sitting here on our spiritual path, just like, I'm on my spiritual path, and it's just like, wham. And then it's just like, now the war is really like, and we recognize, okay, this is where, this whole other level of war is taking place. So there are positive Zetas and, positive reptilians. So I'm only focusing on the ones that are trying to screw us over. So if anybody just thinks I'm picking on, one type of being, saying that they're all like that, no, there are positively orientated Zetas. And when we look at future human selves and P42 and P52, which Dan Burr talks about, some people think he's full of crap, but I don't know fully and completely. But it does make sense that these future races that supposedly are us in the future, some of them are more negative as they needed to get genetic material to rebuild their emotional body and soul energy. Some who achieved that became more benevolent and wanted us to assist them and host them in their healing. So some might say that's a really good idea, and others might be like, why should we? I'm kind of on the fence. My Libra energy is just like, I can see both sides of everything. That's why I can't make any decisions. But anyway. So according to Phil Schneider, the alien agenda was known by the US government as early as 1933. So it's still within that range, 1926, 1933. Original notes from Schneider indicate that between January of 1947 and December of 1952, 16 UFO crash retrievals took place. We only really hear about Roswell mostly, right? It has been said that approximately 60% of the spacecraft we see are off-world beings, 20% are military reverse engineered craft. So what's interesting is, okay, so Lisa Renee, if you ever look at her website and read her material, energeticsynthesis.com, it's very obvious and clear that she really knows her stuff. I mean, so much information, and her and I have had epic, conversations for hours on the phone. We become, really good friends, and I feel really good about her information. And so after I understood the initial kind of stuff that you find on the internet about ET government treaties, and I delved into her information, this started to make a lot of sense. Because if we're talking 1926 and 1933, like Schneider and Keylontic Science was saying, well, here we go, here's another indication that this happened earlier. So during the time that Franklin D. Roosevelt was president, from 1933 to 1945, according to the Guardians, several species of gray aliens contacted all the major world governments and made secret treaties with many of them. Churchill is the one who made the deals. They mind-controlled Hitler and also worked with Aleister Crowley, a black magician. Again, only accept this if it resonates. It's coming from really good sources. And it does make a lot of sense if you think about it, because there was a lot of this sort of technology trade and things going on during the Second World War. And nobody hears about Churchill in connection with the ET. I mean, I don't know if you guys have. I didn't until I found this. And then I started to dig a little deeper, and I found it in other places as well. And then Aleister Crowley, I think we can all admit he's kind of a freaky person. Black magician. He might have a great tarot deck, but he definitely was involved in some things from the Atlantean times, and was very compromised, was able to work with some of these individuals to figure out how to trap souls, how to kind of like, that's why they call it Monarch programming, because it's like a net catching souls to bring them in and use them and their higher abilities for their dark agendas. And so he passed on a lot of, teachings or ways to go about this. And there's, obviously a lot more information that I can't, bring into just a presentation. But this is just to kind of get an idea. So the intention was to create continual world wars. And ever since we dropped into this lower density, we've had nothing but war. We've had the electrical wars, we had the Lemurian Holocaust, the Atlantean cataclysms, the Nephilim wars, the Egypt-Sumerian, on and on and on. And we just look at human history, it's just war, war, war. Well, what are we really fighting? We're fighting ourselves. Because if we have this advanced DNA that we haven't switched on and it's all scrambled and our DNA codes are scrambled, it's us that are scrambled amongst each other. Because we're the representation on a world level, on a global level, of what the scrambling looks like, which means that none of us is in harmony. That's why we can't access it, because it's fighting each other all the time. And it holds historical resentments. Your family did this to my family, your ancestors did this to mine, our ancestors are bigger victims than your ancestors, and it's just like on and on and on. And then the supposed chosen ones, and that's just a bunch of BS, because there's no such thing. And I said yesterday, the chosen one is love and wisdom. Any single person that is able to reach that level of consciousness is just chosen. And what are they chosen to do? To help elevate the human race, to help switch them on, to help activate them, not create this hierarchical system of control because it thinks it's better. And that's part of the whole reason we've been scrambled, because we've been under the authority of these, warring factions, and even these, intel wars are taking place between these different groups that hold power, that are fighting amongst each other. Because we're like the prize in the middle, because we're such a powerful group of beings. So as long as we don't buy into it, we can unscramble these fire codes, understanding that harmony is diversity in harmony. We can all be different, but learn like an orchestra to play our instruments together and maintain our individuality while also respecting differences and getting over what these continual world wars have sought to do, which is to conquer and divide us, to pit us against each other. And that's how we unscramble the fire codes, is to be a being of unity, knowing that anything that we fight is a war within ourselves. And the only way to win an outer war is to win the war within. And because it's a war on consciousness, to take it upon ourselves to win the war within is to stop being in this lower energy of like conquest, competition, battle, and looking to tear somebody down to build yourself up. So anyway, that was what the result of world wars does to consciousness. And then, of course, the traumas. The traumas keep us in that, our nervous system, instead of bringing in higher awareness, it's constantly being triggered by PTSD and traumas from the past, which keeps us from being able to progress. It makes us vulnerable to staying in that loop. So anyway, conquer and divide the human race, keep them busy, drain them of all their resources from the earth and the life force of humans, to serve their agendas. So you know how we feel tired a lot? It's just like, hey man, I feel so drained, I'm just so tired, I just want to go to sleep. Then you go to sleep and it's just another battle on the astral. It's just like, then you wake up and it's like, and every night I go, and it's just like, come on, let's just have a peaceful time. And it's like, sometimes I do have really incredible dreams, but other times it's just like, just a battle zone. Yeah, but we all know, we've had those magical dreams before, and that's always there. But yeah, there's a lot of heavy astral stuff that we tend to have to move through. So anyway, Crowley, Churchill, Hitler connection is what established the gray alien agreements with the government. Yes, the Guardian said that Churchill actually met with the aliens while he was prime minister, and the beginning of the technology trade took place, Churchill and UK wanting it for world domination, that led to the human experiments such as mind control through psychotronics and time travel. And so that's the Ascension glossary. And again, it's not something we normally hear about. If I feel good about anybody's information, it's definitely Lisa's. And I wasn't talking about this part of ET government treaties until a couple of years ago when I came across this. And it's not so much about picking on the actual world leaders. We have to understand that if they have compatible DNA with the reptilian, they can just yank them out of their body and replace it and just work their agenda through them. So it's not really about blaming the individual. I'm sure like the natural soul of most of these people would not make these decisions for the human race. And the issue is that, there are powerful technologies and ways and means for them to be able to, work their agenda through certain types of individuals. And so when we look at the hybrids and the kind of DNA that they have, that's why the 13 families have been so manipulated. But it's through trauma-based mind control, multi-generational. It's not like they're just waking up, grabbing power. These people have been through a lot of disassociation and trauma to have this happen, for them to be able to even be taken over. So, we really just want the organic soul to return and just maybe see the larger picture, so we don't always feel like it's us and them. They could really use just our awareness and understanding of what takes place, because they were given really advanced DNA. The Syrian and reptilian hybrids, they have what's called the Orphan consciousness, but mixed with the reptilian energy, the trauma has kicked them out of the better aspects of themselves to keep them in this loop. And to keep this family energy, running the show, so that this other agenda could come in. And that's kind of like free will universe. It's, yeah. So these treaties involve supplying numbers of human adults and children that the government agreed to barter for abduction, work camps, sexual slavery, forced breeding, genetic experimentation, genetic augmentation, and secret space programs. So as long as they supply a number of humans, here, this is what you get in return. So it got out of control, actually, during that era, during Roosevelt-Churchill administration time. Roosevelt didn't get so heavily involved, but this is when this all started, and the infiltration of the secret space programs. And so even though Eisenhower warns us about the military-industrial complex, the infiltration began quite a while before he stepped into office. And we see different things taking place during the Second World War. We hear stories, and we see a lot of manipulation about the way that we're supposed to identify with the history. But I would say that the Holocaust happened, but a lot of Holocausts happened. It wasn't just that one. And so, when we look at different books written and different numbers, being told, or the whole idea that it never happened at all, I think it happened and a lot more happened that we don't hear about. Multiple Holocausts and all sorts of, different things took place. We hear about the, I don't even know how to pronounce the word. It begins with an E, but anyway, it was just a horrific time. And so that's when this kind of like off-planet thing began to get, really compromised. So the treaties also have to do with bartering exchanges of planetary goods, natural resources, elements and compounds, and materials that can be taken off-planet. Those that were genetically enhanced or had special skill sets, such as high psionic ability, were trained to be placed in a variety of military positions and or for other functions, such as work as scientists, engineers, geneticists, as well as study these experiments in high-tech laboratories. So we hear about underground bases and all this sort of stuff, and very, skilled and intelligent individuals that were genetically enhanced. We hear about super soldiers and stuff like that, to basically be used for this larger agenda, which is part of the bartering. And that level of control kept individuals from being able to really break free. And they do that in a lot of institutions. They'll train you to be like a physicist, then they'll use you to make a bomb. It's like, and so we can't blame the individuals that are underneath the control of something that's threatening their life or threatening their family if we aren't able to use you for these reasons. And that's an important aspect to all this. So in exchange for abducting human beings, these government leaders would be given access to extremely advanced off-planet or alien technologies, spacecraft, blueprints, militarized weaponry, zero-point power source technology, and so forth. And so obviously that's being kept from us. Cures for diseases are being kept from us. And it's understandable with the amount of people on the planet that we wouldn't want to disclose so much. But the wrong people obviously have had these technologies. If you put them in the right hands, it could probably, come out in a very responsible and integrous way, particularly focusing on those that need it most. Let's take care of those that need to be fed and clothed, and those that are dealing with, illness and injury. And, once we take care of the people, and once, spiritual principles, not based on dogma, but based on connection to true zero point and our ability to understand what junk DNA really is to advance ourselves and be responsible to each other, then we can start bringing in the even more fun stuff and not use it against each other. because these technologies have been used to weaponize humans, weaponize nature, and weaponize all these things that are absolutely sacred, including our sexual energies. So obviously, if they're making deals with the groups that are service to self, we're not going to have any. We might have our cell phones, our iPhones, and little emojis and texting each other and like posting on social media, telling them, guess how much we know? You know, and they're just sitting here like, oh, we're going to surveillance you, and like, oh, geez. They're just like laughing at us with all these memes because they've completely figured this out. Because we're not stupid. You can't put a lid on a volcano. Consciousness is way too powerful for mind control. And so we have busted through, and there's no turning back. So Morgan Martel discusses on his website about Project Paperclip, which took place after the Second World War. One purpose of the operation was to inhibit post-war Germany from redeveloping its military research capabilities. One of the fields that Nazi doctors and psychologists had made advances in was that of social and behavioral engineering in humans, also known as mind control. So a lot of people know some of the details of some of the things like Mengele and some of those experimentations. And, you know, so then we have, you know, this infiltration of the US with them all coming over, and the social and behavioral engineering. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, still, just put on the TV if you're staying at a hotel. If you don't watch TV at home and you're wondering what's going on in the world through the television box, nothing's really changed. The same crap, but like different. And I was like, Tony the Tiger's still alive. I was like, well, he's a cartoon. Cartoons don't really die. I'm like, I haven't seen Tony the Tiger since, because, you know, yeah. It's like, yeah, he's still around. The cartoon looks a little different because the old voice probably isn't around, but it's just really bizarre to put the TV back on. And of course, you know, it just captures the minds of children, and we're not seeing nature shows or encouraging children, you know, or just health or well-being. It's just the programming, buy, consume. Nothing's changed. So, and that's all, you know, part of these agendas. So if we break it down and look at like, okay, well, what is behind it? What sort of projects are behind it? You know, people are being used to, you know, express these sort of agendas. We have Hollywood celebrities and politicians that have been a part of these projects that they have total control over. One project being Project Monarch. It could be best described as a form of structured disassociation and occultic integration in order to compartmentalize the mind into multiple personalities within a systematic framework. During this process, a satanic ritual, usually including Kabbalistic mysticism, is performed with the purpose of attaching a particular demon or group of demons to the corresponding altars. Pop stars, sports stars, assassins, sex slaves. So trained assassins, you know, anything to do their dirty work for them. Anything to put somebody in a leadership position to begin to socially engineer and mind control the masses. Now, they're scattered amongst those that probably don't have this programming, so I'm not saying that these whole industries, you know, are horrible, but there are a lot that, you know, we hear about. If anybody's heard of Fiona Barnett and some of the names that she's come out with, and, you know, a lot of people have heard about Isaac Cappy and others that are exposing some of these names. And I know it's like super disturbing, and I don't want to be like the super disturbing presentation, but it gets lighter in a little while. So Project Monarch is a U.S. Defense Department code name assigned to a subsection of the Central Intelligence Agency's Operation Artichoke, later became Project MKUltra, and they did say that, oh, all that's being shut down. We admit to some of it, but it never, you know, got shut down. If anybody's heard of Kathy O'Brien, I did an event with her and got to know her a bit, and she wrote a book called Transformation of America, brings in some of the politicians that we hear about. I don't really want to name names, I have already before. But it was pretty wild because when I gave her a hug, my necklace got caught on her sweater, and we were literally like trapped in a hug for the longest time, just laughing. And I was like, I just couldn't believe, you know, it was Kathy O'Brien. I learned so much from her story, and just pure heart. And she gave a really incredible presentation, and she went through this sort of thing. And there are a lot of people that have broken through the program. And the thing is, they chose advanced souls to tinker. I don't know what they were thinking, because these advanced souls that have pulled through are making themselves known now, and we can all, you know, really work together to take this, you know, down even further. Because they rely on our mind control. They rely on our power and energy for them to even operate. So anyway, they're super soldiers. DARPA today has a long-term $3 billion program to help make such a metabolically dominant soldier. In other words, the military is studying how to use technology and biology to meld man and machine and transcend the limits of the human body. Project Mannequin is a program to genetically enhance, to create genetically enhanced assassins. So a lot of the shootings we hear about and things like that, whether they're false flags or not, I mean, mostly anything that's going into that zone. I mean, mind control creates, criminality. Project MKUltra was exposed publicly in 1970 through lawsuits filed by Canadian survivors or their surviving families. So I talked about this a little bit yesterday. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but the human race is targeted. So here we have Project MK Delta, called Deep Sleep, 1960, CIA, description, fine-tuned electromagnetic subliminal programming, targeting long-range, frequency range VHF, HF, UHF, modulated at ELF, transmission and reception through television and radio antenna, power lines, mattress spring coils, modulation of 60 hertz wiring. Purpose, programming behavior and attitudes in general population. Effects, fatigue, mood swings, behavior dysfunction, and criminality. So it's like scary to think that if we have the wrong bed, I mean, God knows how many mattresses from thrift stores I've slept on, probably woke up a little grumpy, fatigued, mood swinged, blamed it on me, whatever we come up with. Oh, this must be why I'm not feeling so great today. And why, for some reason, I just want to know. But, we have to realize, that they're finding all ways and mechanisms to get to us through these different devices, through things as simple as like the bed that we sleep on. So we might want to just, notice that and understand, yes, we have inner work to do, but a lot of the stuff that we're up against is a lot of attack and a lot of frequency modulation and distortion that gets into our brain waves, gets into our nervous system, and makes us somebody that we're not. But because we're so limited to the personality matrix, it's very easy for us to be vulnerable to it because we're not going into these other levels that could actually completely knock it out, because that frequency is much higher. So when we can tap into something much greater, we can actually dismantle it and neutralize it. And through that extra time that we take for ourselves, we can not be so affected. And so you'll see, earthquakes and other things, crowd dispersion, and just all these projects. But I mentioned it yesterday, so I don't want to put, too much time on it. So the OSS, the Office of Strategic Studies, resorted to whitewashing the histories of the Nazis, or sometimes even creating entirely new identities, which made it easy for them to spread their influence in America. So in 1946, President Truman authorized Project Paperclip. And again, because these treaties originated in the Churchill time and Roosevelt, and starting in 1926, 1933, when it came into the United States, a lot of that technology was already something that they had. And they were just going to come up with like the new renewed treaty called the Greada Treaty to present to the US governments, even though it was something that was already established. And supposedly they renew them every 10 years. So it has been said by the whistleblower of M16 that the CIA was created almost 2 years after this in the American National Security Act of 1947 to handle the massive number of mind control, cloning, and other covert projects that were born from Paperclip. MJ-12 was also created as a group dealing in ET investigations. Now, as far as the documents and the timing of this or that, there's a lot of different opinions about it, so I don't tend to go into all of it. It's just the fact is these things were established when and under who, doesn't matter as much as the fact that it does exist. So the Nazi space program became operational during the Second World War, despite the defeat of the Axis powers. The Nazis, according to Dr. Michael Salla, escaped to secret bases in South America and Antarctica, where they established an alliance with a group of extraterrestrials called the Draco Reptilians. The Nazis were then able to successfully defeat a punitive military expedition by Admiral Byrd called Operation High Jump in 1947. Now, I know Michael gets his information from people like Corey Good and others. Take it or leave it. What makes sense to me and why I include some of this is because it just goes to show that we really didn't win the Second World War. And after what we thought was the end of the war, things were still happening, trying to continue to deal with these individuals. So both President Truman in general and future President Eisenhower tried to negotiate with the Nazis. They refused to agree to their terms until they flew UFOs over Washington, D.C. from July 12th through the 29th, 1952. Above the president, MJ-12 had made it a secret law above the president in 1947 that the entire subject and knowledge of UFOs and their occupants was to remain the highest guarded secret, only above atomic weapons. So a lot of people are like, well, why didn't they just say something? Well, lots of people were getting offed, William Cooper, Phil Schneider, and others, and these laws put in place. I mean, especially if you were a president, I mean, your hands were really tied. So, and I just like to pull bits and pieces out. It doesn't reflect the fact that I agree with everything connected to the individuals that I might quote, or that, or what my disposition might be, but when I find certain information that connects a dot, I need to bring it in, I feel. So this is where the development and infiltration of the military-industrial complex began and eventually led to the most powerful of the secret Earth government group entities that we are referring to as the interplanetary corporate conglomerate. So again, people need to have their own discernment and decide whether or not that rings true for you. My point of bringing that in is that there were negotiations, there were things that took place that made it very, very difficult to actually win the war. The history books say that we won the war, and I personally know that we didn't. But we win the war within ourselves because it's a war on consciousness. And so it's just a great reminder that if we didn't win the outer war, we have to win the inner war, because that's really what it's targeting. So the Bilderberg Group was created in 1952 to take the decision-making about the alien problem and other international issues out of the hands of governments who saw them as a threat. Over the years, the Bilderberg Group evolved into, or merged with, a secret world government. By now, it's almost entirely populated by the Illuminati. So when you look at these groups, and you look at the alien issue, and these are the power-hungry ones, the ones that are being compromised multi-generationally, abused to hold these positions, then we see how this alliance and these dark agendas are able to move through governments, politicians, and these different things. And putting an end to it is something that we have to educate ourselves about, because it comes down really to the individual. The NSA is exempt from all laws in the United States unless the NSA itself is specifically mentioned in any creation of law. It is completely separate, yet our tax dollars are funding it. There was also a great deal of private money used by the NSA to build the alien technology and to keep humanity under control, to keep the status quo secure. So I'm sure people have heard of Alex Collier. Contactee of Andromeda Council. So just kind of bouncing around from different whistleblowers, different people that have made contact, just kind of connecting dots. Again, I don't follow any single one person, like to the point where I understand fully their whole, what they're completely and totally all about, but just the bits and pieces that seem to fit into what makes, sense to me. I mean, obviously, the NSA is able to operate under a different level of jurisdiction than us. Same with like places like Area 51. It's like a reservation. It's like its own country. And Eisenhower supposedly wanted to invade Area 51 when he realized that MJ-12 and the technologies they had their hands on were things were getting out of control. So by the time Eisenhower stepped into office, the draconian system had already infiltrated the three-letter organizations, and eventually defense-related projects got infiltrated as technology exchanges took place and wasn't easily monitored. So again, when I first did my research, I was only talking about the Greada Treaty, 1954, this and that. I didn't have this back history that I now have through a lot of my research. And once I began to understand it more, and I knew that like something wasn't going to let me stop digging, it became very, very clear to me that he had, stepped into this. And my mom wrote a book actually about, and a portion of it is that he put a time capsule in the Gettysburg Farm talking about all his supposed allies that he was working with that did not have humanity's best interests at heart, but for the protection of family members, that we wouldn't be able to open it till 2050. And I'm like one of those, give me the sledgehammer, we're going to Gettysburg Farm, and I'm going to rip down the walls, and I don't, I already have a loud mouth. What worse can happen? Like what? It's like, been there, done that. We've all died. And if we're in enough of the ascension energies, I'll just blip right back in, right? No. It's like pretty hopeful. But I do go to the Gettysburg Farm quite a bit still. And it's really, really hard to contain myself, I'm like. But anyway, there's only so much that could be, spoken about during then. But I still do bring up this treaty. So in 1954, a treaty supposedly with the Greys was reached after an agreement could not be reached with the Nordics. And the reason they were very suspicious is because certain rogue groups of Nordics were connected with this dark agenda. So it was very difficult to try and know who to trust. Whistleblowers have said that 4 different races were present at the secret meetings: the Nordics, alien Greys, a humanoid group with some at least 9 feet tall, and a race that was reptilian in nature. So there are many competing thoughts and opinions about this, so I can't say it's 100% true, But Colonel Philip Corso, former advisor of President Eisenhower's National Security Council, revealed the treaty was a Trojan horse. They were not benevolent, and they broke the treaty, which is similar to the other treaties I mentioned in regards to Churchill. So this was a renewal. And by the time he stepped into office, they considered it a surrender because they didn't have the technological ability to fight against them. And there were so many humans and infiltrations with these other organizations that it had grown into a monster that wasn't easily like, oh, no, we're just not going to agree with you. This is something that has been an orchestrated timeline that has been heavily planned for quite some time, putting all these different people in positions to control them or compromise them so that they could get away with it. And so fortunately, he was able to give us a warning, but that's most like all he could really do in regards to this. And some do say that he did want to disclose this information. There's so much more there's so much more I could share, and new whistleblowers that I've met about peace treaties and different things to protect humans, and there's a lot more. So that would be like maybe next year's presentation as I gather more data. But alternatives 1, 2, and 3 was something that was spoken about during his administration. So when President Eisenhower was in office, he commissioned a secret society known as the Jason Society in 1955, which was considered to be a branch of MJ-12. So supposedly Truman established MJ-12 while in office. Some might disagree and say Eisenhower did. There's a lot of differing opinions in the ufology community as far as how that all happened. But anyway, the Jason Scholars was created to sift through all the facts, evidence, technology, lies, and deception and find the truth of the alien question. So alternatives 1, 2, and 3 are 3 agendas recommended by the Jason Society scholars and are related to different scenarios to prevent a possible future doomsday that is more than likely induced and not natural. HARP technologies and weather modification can control weather and induce superstorms. So when I was recruited to go to Mars, which is connected to all of this, alternative number 3 about colonization of Mars, I knew enough about chemtrails, HARP technologies, and the abilities that they have to create superstorms, and also how, if they can do that, they're actually engineering an artificial timeline. So if they're able to engineer an artificial timeline, then the whole idea of having to leave the planet is not necessary. And I knew from the time I was small that this ascension window period is an Earth cosmic event, and this is something happening on this planet. And I got a lot of interesting dreams and a lot of major hits intuitively. Don't go anywhere, no matter what they say. Just sort of the same, like go where, like what. And then in 2006, this presented itself. And I wasn't able to create anything on my path. I'm like, something is trying to stop me. But you can't walk around and be like, something is trying to stop me. It's like, it's just like, there's invisible weapons. It's like, I didn't even think of that. I'm like, you got a lot of inner work to do. You're just, must have done something in a past life to just, you can't create anything. And then I bumped into a clairvoyant institute, which I didn't plan on going to, and they recognized, they said, wow, you got all these weapons, they were learning a lot looking at my space, that there was all this attention. And later I met other whistleblowers, like Andrew Bashago said, they talked about me in Project Pegasus, and I was pre-targeted before birth to get me to Mars. And that's why my whole life I've had this attention on me that I could not shake off. And eventually, when I just gave up, I said, okay, where are these control forces trying to take me? I met the partner that was connected with the secret group called the Aviary, that now is actually connected with DeLong and this whole other space thing that seems to be somewhat of a facade. And they're not stopping at anything, but I kind of outed them, and they're called the Aviary, and connected to psychotronic weaponry, gang stalking, MyLabs, and all this stuff. I wasn't MyLab, but my partner was, and he was used as bait. And they actually located us with Looking Glass Technologies in a past life because we were a partnership. And they knew that if I met him, I'd be like, oh, he's so familiar. Oh, I'm so in love. And which happened a couple months, as we were getting to know each other. And he was talking about going to Mars, and I just thought it was something that was the public would know, and it was just, whatever. And then I realized all this other stuff, which I've pulled together in my presentations, and I fought against it. I'm like, we don't need to go to Mars. And if we do go to Mars, like, I need to be able to talk to these people. I wasn't allowed to talk to them. It was just basically through him, and it's just like, no, you're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and it's for your protection, and all this BS, and we're going to put you in this position. It's a leadership position, and this is going to happen to the world, and you're lucky that we're taking you off planet to protect you. And I was just like, I wasn't afraid of them. I just got on the phone and I started blabbing about it. Actually, I got on the phone with Michael Sala, and then Alfred Weber gave me an interview, and I said, if I'm meant to share this, it'll all fall together. And somehow an email ended up in his folder that was never meant to go to him. And he calls me, he goes, I got to interview you. I'm like, how did you get that email? Like, I don't know who's monitoring or who's doing what, but it just, yeah, the timing was right for me to, expose it. So the first alternative is about the use of nuclear devices to blast holes in the stratosphere from which heat and pollution could escape into space. The second aims at building a network of underground cities and tunnels in which mankind's selected elite could survive. The third deals with a secret space colonization program on Mars with the same purpose. Phil Schneider mentioned there are about 131 deep underground military bases in the USA. Others have mentioned 4,000 worldwide. So alien and advanced technology was hidden by the power elite and taken off planet, which fell into the hands of corporate greed and power mongers. The same human and non-human entities who succeeded in take over control of the planet are those which broke up these main organizations into several breakaway civilizations. And that's, again, Lisa Renee. So, and that's what was really weird, because when I was talking to Andrew when I first met him, it was like, it makes sense that we would want to protect the human genome in the event of a cataclysm, or we've had cataclysms before. We've had planets blown up. We've had Atlantean cataclysms. We had Holocaust and all this different stuff. But there's something particular about this window period where those things aren't going to repeat. And, yeah, and so, we're at this place of really blossoming and like learning the right use of power and like overcoming these disasters from the past that they're trying to loop us back into that trauma of, oh, it's easy to prey upon the minds of well-intentioned people who want to protect the human genome, saying this is what we have to do in order to protect the human race, is go off planet and do this kind of stuff. And it's like, sure, that makes sense to a certain degree, but when you look a little bit deeper and you just see the red flags and the lack of ability to communicate and share this kind of stuff and share the knowledge of what this ascension time really means and things about the rest of the stuff I, try and bring into presentations, it was very clear that this agenda had been infiltrated, and any cataclysm that we might experience on Earth would be engineered and manufactured with weather weapons. So Eisenhower is a part of the creation of the secret space programs, but without his leadership, many failing organizations had no accountability to their actions, and infighting between the organizations spread. This continued lack of transparency and continued deception going on between these world powers spread corruption, greed, mind control, and horrific crimes against humanity. And again, that's Lisa, who brings a lot of attention to this, which was really helpful for me. And part of helping is like setting up some of these organizations to try and understand the alien issue, and not realizing the larger picture of some of the people that he thought were trustworthy, or at least looking out for humanity's best interests, and not really being able to escape the fact that he was, pushed into this position. And I was very close to his son, John, who actually used to live around here. I used to hang out in certain areas around here. And, he would confide in me at like family gatherings of how hard it was, first of all, to have his father as president, and how much his father did not want to be president. And he would kind of joke, like, and I don't mean like I don't like labels, but he would joke, he's like, I'm a hippie at heart. He's like, but somebody has to tell these war stories and like bring attention to, this sort of thing that happened. And there's crazy stories that my aunt even told me about. Just, I won't even go there because it would take too long, but just some very interesting things about the way that they, really think and view reality. And it's just such a down-to-earth group of people. And people think, oh, you're a presidential family. What, we show up in limos to like no, we're like in a little cabin. We're driving like beat-up Toyotas. It's like, and we do karaoke because we don't want to talk politics, right? So David Eisenhower and I are like doing Carpenter like duets. And it's just like, and like his wife is Julie Nixon, and they live like right up, and they're not what people think, And so it's one thing to get those projections and like, oh, you're from this, and it couldn't be more down to earth and like normal, but it's like they're traumatized. It's just like people think this is some sort of glamorous thing, at least in their circles. They're like, it's horrible to be related in that kind of like daughter or son of a president. It's horrific. And Nixon was a little bit more compromised, but it's very interesting over the years to really get to know them. And Julie helped raise me, and she's one of the most loving and kindest people. But I didn't know this like connection, and I would like pick up a phone and play like with my cousins, and I didn't realize I was calling a Secret Service man that was sitting in the garage, and I was just like, whoops. It was interesting. So 10 different secret space programs that Michael Sala talks about, and I don't need to go into that. But anyway, on Zeta Talk website, it says those connected to alternative 3 are service to cell zeta grays. So through much programming, they have managed to convince many well-intentioned people that it was in our best interest to move off planet. Behind the scenes, a catastrophic timeline, in my eyes, is purposely being created to thin out the population and begin the creation of a transhumanism world. Because if the connection from spirit is gone, technology is the new life cycle. Abduction scenarios to gain genetic information to keep this cycle alive, to trick death through jumping timelines and using advanced technology is what I've come to understand. I've never time traveled. I've never been to Mars. I've never used teleportation. I only can say that I've heard about this from a number of whistleblowers. I don't doubt it, but I don't want to say absolutes, because unless I experience it myself, I can't, really fully say, but there are a lot that, are talking about this sort of thing. So anyway, like I said, in 2006, they attempted to recruit me into a hidden operation regarding the alternative 3 colonization of Mars scenario. Supposedly I was pre-targeted before birth, and I knew there was something really weird going on. And it's like, why? Well, maybe the bloodline thing, maybe because they didn't want me to be the loudmouth I am, and they could tell in the future that I might, who knows? I mean, God knows how many people they might have tried to recruit. The whole thing is they tell you something that isn't true. Normally, what seems to have happened is they get people there, they lure them, and it's not what they say it's going to be. And I didn't know that. I just knew in my heart, just don't go, just don't go. There's just no way that I would separate from this Mother Earth anyway. I mean, it was just no way. I don't even if it did blow up, so I'll blow up with Mother Earth. I'm not going to Mars. I just knew that. And I know there's a history there and this and that, but so anyway, I knew if I went, I would not be assisting in the organic ascension. I was aware of all this as a child. I mean, lots of it was coming through, and it was really hard to just go to school or do anything with this other dialogue going on. So, it was easier to just be the projection that everybody had on me. Like, I won most out of touch with reality for my senior class, and it was just like, cool. And now they see me, oh, you're being interviewed and you're traveling the world talking, and they're like, They're like, still don't want to really associate with me, but I've always connected with the Venus energy, so I found it interesting that I was contending with Mars. And really how I see it is what we're doing as a humanity, we're rebalancing the masculine and feminine. And the way that these planetary energies are being worked and manipulated are a part of that imbalance. So if there's a hidden Mars agenda, there's also a hidden agenda within our own ego that is allowing these nefarious forces to kind of run the show or convince us of something, which is targeting the personality matrix and our fears and our survival energy of, but it's only telling a few. And what about everybody else? And so I refused also because there's no way in hell I would go somewhere without the human race being aware of where their tax dollars has gone, because we all deserve something so huge. And the whole concept of elitism is the absolute biggest load of BS I've ever heard. And there was just, no way. So I declined to go to Mars because I believe in the power of the human spirit. I could also sense something was not right about this recruitment. The group involved are called the Aviary. It's a collection of strange birds, a group of key scientists, military men, and intelligence agents who share an interest in UFOs, telepathy, remote viewing, parapsychology, mind control, and the creation of psychotronic weapons. Now, remote viewing from the right people is good. Obviously, a lot of these kind of abilities and interests are good. They work coming from the right people. So very often, the right people have to counteract these agendas through the same type of abilities. It's like, I understand occultic stuff. I mean, astrology and tarot, if you want to call that occult, that's about as far as I go. I don't do like rituals or anything. And there's a lot of websites that are really trying to make me somebody I'm not, which is, I kind of get a laugh. And then when people actually believe in those websites, I get a little like, oh man. But anyway, it's just the knowledge of being able to see a much larger picture. It can be used for the betterment of self and humanity or not. So anyway, telepathy, remote viewing, in and of itself, not a negative thing. You put it in the, these abilities who work with advanced humans that they use to be able to use then the mind control of psychotronic weapons. So when I found out that there were psychotronic weapons on me and I was being somewhat harassed and stalked to get me to Mars, that was great when that website came out, because that website didn't come out till 4 or 5 years after I refused the Mars agenda. I had nothing to go on but my own intuition. Project Camelot wasn't even really around, or it was just beginning. I didn't know any other whistleblowers, and I was just, trying to just rely on, and I was like, what if I made the wrong decision? What if this is really important for the human race? It was like really heavy. And then years later, because I had mentioned the word aviary, somebody did their research and came up with a website, names all the names. They all have bird names. And I always joke, it felt like I was in a Batman movie because it was like Penguin. They had Penguin, they had Owl, Chicken Little. Chicken Little was the one that defected and helped me to understand everything and why, you know, the recruitment happened. And obviously there's probably a lot of people, maybe they haven't come forward, that dealt with something similar. But to me, the most benevolent force that is with us is the mother energy and planetary consciousness that is returned. We need to understand our DNA and how it connects to the grids and stargates on the earth. We need to embrace our dark and light, balance the masculine and feminine, and overcome the agendas that seek to conquer and divide. So, okay, what makes it a little bit difficult when this is all the stuff that we're up against? 5G, geoengineering, false flag agendas to lower consciousness and create false fake war on terror. Again, every time we take a huge leap as a humanity, usually something happens in the news to drop us. Then, of course, pedophilia, satanic ritual abuse, which is incredibly disturbing. And that is what keeps the dark mother reversal codes. It keeps digression, it keeps the ley lines and the portals like in a really like stuck state, like heavy density miasma. Like it just keeps us in a low density to generate that level of darkness. Then transhumanism possibilities, ET government treaties, mind control implants, targeting, brain mapping. You know, AI, Jade Helm, we don't hear much about that anymore, but media distortions, masculine, feminine distortions that keep us in a power struggle instead of harmony, and fake alien invasion has always been a possibility. The use of blue beam technology, potential false ascended masters, new age distortions, you know, so we have to be very careful, you know, if we decide we want to channel what we're actually bringing in. Some of the new age distortions, I don't want to bust on it too much, but it can make it very difficult for us to own the processing that we need to go through. Our shadow work, you know, some of the things that maybe we don't want to see that need to come to the surface because it really kind of locks us into, oh, that's, you know, bad, or if we talk about certain things, that's fear, that's generating fear. But, you know, is our own shadow something to fear? No, it's something to move through. It's something that once we move through and get to the other side, we're clearer, we're more awake, and we can advance ourselves. But to deny it, it just keeps us looping. So anyway, the ruling elite have devised chemtrails as a means of covertly microchipping us all in order to create antennas inside of us via nanotechnology to make us totally controllable via a psycho-civilized, electrically mind-controlled society. Using HAARP microwave antennas, the NSA can establish a seamless computer link direct to our brains, but first they're using chemtrails to get the nanoparticles into us, which are reassembling in our bodies to form the antennas. And that's not really working, right? I mean, maybe next year we'll all show up with little antennas and we'll just make fun. It's not going to work. I mean, so that was really what they were attempting to do. We might notice our skies are still being sprayed. We might be filled with nanites, but the thing is, it's a frequency thing again. When we start to move our consciousness into higher dimensional energies, we neutralize this stuff, we alchemize this stuff. Alchemy is a natural occurrence in nature. I mean, if we see a butterfly turn into, or excuse me, a caterpillar turn into a butterfly, I mean, that's proof right there that there is a way to actually go through a metamorphosis through actually going into a bit of the dark night of the soul, which I talked about yesterday, of just really allowing ourselves to kind of go through this huge rebirth, drop the programmings, drop, you know, the stuff we've been taught, open our minds up to ourselves, you know, our own education from our own wisdom bodies, and see, you know, where it links up to others. But I would start with the self before we overly bring in outer information. So the intention behind my presentations is to hopefully give people, you know, an activation that's personal instead of just, you know, throwing a bunch of information. But when this stuff gets into our system, you know, and we see, you know, waves of like energy happening that affect a lot of people, you know, sometimes they are just in that thing. So our nervous system acts as the frequency conduit, which allows the higher self energy to be transmitted to our body through ion channels, which produce an electromagnetic signal. The electromagnetic signal received is then transmitted from our neurological system to communicate directly with our personal DNA signal. Trauma is also stored in our DNA and can lower our capacity to get the downloads if we don't face it. So we got to face our traumas. It's challenging because we're trying to ascend, so we get, you know, targeted. And as we move beyond our 7 chakras, the feeling of defeat can set in for some because, you know, it makes it difficult. So we see people getting targeted to target others. Relationships get targeted. Plants are put in places. One of their techniques with me is, and I have a witness to this, they had a list of people that were plants that they put on my path purposely to trip me up, to get my heart open, because they knew they couldn't mind control me, but if they could open my heart, which they did with the person trying to get me to Mars, because they totally had control over him, even though he was familiar, is to open my heart, and then wham, this person would do a 360-degree turn and absolutely traumatize me. And that's why, poor Kevin, it's just like, the first couple of months is just like interrogation, like making sure he's not an agent. And even though people are spreading rumors that he's my handler, I can safely say that no, he is not. But believe me, I put him through the ringer just in case. But anyway, there's all sorts of techniques, right? So the trauma keeps us in the fight or flight, so it's very difficult to get epiphanies and downloads when we're all, on edge like that. And there's just all sorts of tactics. And that's why laughter is so wonderful, because that just, yeah. So if we're programmed, we draw in AI signals, which takes us into a transhumanism trap. But if we're focused on our spiritual path and being sovereign, we draw in organic ascension energies and we begin to upgrade. The underworld journey, I feel, is a part of the preparation. And a spiritual path should not be defined. It's a personal thing. It's based on your truth, what resonates with you, what makes you feel healthy, what makes you feel authentic, what makes you feel whole and connected. There's no definition of what that should look like as far as I'm concerned. And that's what being sovereign is that we allow each other that respect to find our way to that feeling and that possible even feeling of bliss is long lasting. So outer planets create initiations: Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune. Pluto throws us into the death, rebirth, alchemical transformation cycles. Uranus is electrical, and it stimulates the nervous system, gives us the downloads, but sometimes gives us a lot of shock. Things come out of left field. So when people are like, well, what do I do? What's my purpose? These planets will basically do most of the work for us. Our job, though, is to be in alignment. It's like a sailor. You can't tell the wind what to do, but you do have the ability to work with it and co-create with it, with the rudder or the wheel and the sails. And so because these are great universal energies and forces that are streaming rays of like 0-point unified field into the planet, when I look at somebody's chart, I see, well, how do they relate to these three outer planets? If there's difficult aspects, it might mean they're in resistance. It might mean they just want to control it, or they misunderstand these initiations and they feel like they're losing their mind or having a breakdown. Neptune connects us with the creative imagination, and if there's enough trauma, it can haunt us, where our imaginations run wild and, we believe or see things that are not really what they are. It takes us into that place of what's real and what's not. But the thing is, the imagination is the great creator. So what isn't real can become real, but sometimes if it's negative, we generate it into our environment because there's been a previous injury or wound, and we have to kind of like reorientate it, and sound healing and different things to help us with clearing the frequencies, can help. And so those three planets we just want to have a good relationship with. And what's beautiful about everybody's chart is everybody's got the potential to be in their avatar consciousness, because the zodiac with the 12 houses is a map to help us to advance ourselves and not need the map anymore, because all these different patternings are going to keep us looping until we master the message and the thing that we need to overcome. So it's helpful, at least temporarily. I feel it can be helpful, but if you don't understand it or learn it, it doesn't really matter, because we still experience it. But if you just want to get really in the nitty-gritty of the details of it all, the intention I hold when I do readings is to, help a person to stand in alignment with the natural activations that are happening, and also to overcome the lower levels of Saturn and to master the Saturn-Moon Matrix manipulations. So people are merged through nanites in the air, food, and water, and a supercomputer sends waves of desires out at just the right moment to influence the masses in coordination with the media, scalar, and weather events and natural biological cycles. Everything is mapped out by artificial intelligence systems designed to resist against humanity becoming aware of their true power and the reality of the situation, including the threats and possibilities. Everything is a distraction or an artificially implanted impulse or desire. The entire civilization is under this net. But we, definitely have the power to overcome this. And I think I included this yesterday, but I thought I had a little bit more time, so I'm just bringing a few things back. So again, if there's this system that wants to stop us from advancing, it's usually around this sort of next step in our spiritual journeys that the attack can get, pretty severe. Psycho-spiritual warfare is radically increased when a person is entering the integration stages of the 7, 8, 9 of the monadic spiritual triad, because this is when we begin to achieve Hieros, Gamos, and Ascension. And so that word Ascension is almost like becoming But it's just when we reach that level of, okay, we have alchemical marriage, we start to integrate polarity, it starts to create changes in our consciousness, even in our physical body. And then when we reach, that, and when we keep being consistent with it, ascension to me is just a blossoming of consciousness. It's just a reawakening of what has always been. And of course, that's going to elevate us and shift us out of this lower density. And we're all in our own kind of timing about it. But when this was lost in the 70 Earth, also when Tiamat exploded, previously there was no separation from these higher energies. And so when we sank into this lower density, it became a fallen system, and we separated from the Andromeda galactic core, which represents our connection to these galactic chakras that are now easier to experience and feel because they're like switching on and turning on. That's why, a lot of people are using, words that represent just the whole idea of finding, that person. But of course, you've got to find it first within, or at least have, some idea of it. But this is what it looks like. I started to get into it a little bit in my last talk, but it's like a crazy 8 spiral around our head, which is also the infinity symbol. But interesting in numerology, the number 8 represents Saturn. And so Saturn, which used to be a sun, we're healing a lot by just healing it within ourselves. And so whatever is kind of off or fragmented or destroyed or exploded that took place in our history is rebuilt and rehabilitated and restored in our own, personal journeys. So, and it's all about, the masculine and feminine. The morphogenetic chakra 8 is gold. The 9 is silver. Thymus, impermanent seed atom of the crystal heart. Atomic doorway, mouth of God, projector of light consciousness. Male, female balance. Morphogenetic chakras begin to galactivate identity to multiple awarenesses of star intelligences and other identities and lifetimes. So there's a lot of individuals that are already able to do that, that may have already overcome the attack or are becoming immune to the attack, recognizing that it kind of comes with the territory. If you let it really, really get the best of you, that's exactly what they want. So when you hear like, don't feed the trolls and all this stuff, I'm certainly not trying to feed the trolls. Sometimes if I'm having a bad day, I just like to rip them a new one. Just, not that I really care, but it's just like, but not in a totally derogatory way, but just because it's entertaining, because it's just like, oh yeah? But, I'm trying to not even do that. So mutations in DNA can occur as a natural or unnatural process. The unnatural is our exposure to mind control, weather weaponry, chemicals, artificial intelligence signals, vaccinations. And I don't want to be controversial, and everybody's got their own comfort level as far as the things that they decide. There are some good ones, and obviously there's an agenda to have ones that aren't. Laboratory-made viruses, toxic elements, and ET control groups have been writing DNA sequence coding into the planetary mind in order to evolve their preferred bloodlines while targeting genetic undesirables or light workers who can elevate humans. This is done to block our higher consciousness from coming through. Because there's no such thing as a genetic undesirable. Because consciousness trumps anything on the physical plane. And when we are really connected with our consciousness, it can do anything to shift the physical. It's just we're not quite through that veil just yet. Or some people are, some people aren't, doesn't matter. We're all eventually going to get there. It really takes devotion. It's like if you're devoted to a partner, you can have a little argument, you can have bumps in the road, but you're devoted, you're committed, and you live with integrity. And that sees it through, despite the ups and downs. So the same thing with advancing as a human race or individually. If we just devote ourselves, regardless of what we go through, the good days, the bad days, we can feel that guidance, we can feel that support, and we can feel the wisdom come in to protect us and help us to understand how to overcome, obstacles. Because to me, if we look at life like an athlete would, and we see hurdles and obstacles and rope courses, we can be, oh yeah, that's a challenge. We can be up for that challenge. But if we're like, hell no, we're just going to sit there and we're not going to allow that warrior energy and warrior spirit to give us the drive and the momentum and the tenacity to tackle it and become stronger and better for it. So anyway, the 5th element, ether, was also put into reversals on the earth grids, and this is now being corrected, and I'll show you more on that. And our relationship to our inner spirit and ancestral clearing can reverse this. So we just have to be aware of artificial ascension agendas, the savior races, the hive mind AI and other agendas, and false channelings. That's supposed to be channelings, not changelings, I don't know. Any being or higher benevolent being, at least as far as I'm concerned, that really wants to help us is going to encourage us to know who we are, what we're made of, and what we're capable of. The ascension energy is something to access within. Our DNA holds the many levels of harmonic universes. Because of the targeting, people feel defeated, and because that breeds lack of self-worth, one just ends up giving their power away to things they feel they might need to show them the way. We need to move through the psychic attacks and be aware of them and protect ourselves and come together with more acknowledgement of that instead of being so bent out of shape and defeated that, you know, somebody else is going to be able to do it for us. And that's the tactic, is that we keep looping in this sort of old paradigm system, but with a different guise, with a different lingo, with a different way of it presenting itself, which can also be, you know, very dangerous of, oh, they're going to show the way. And but, you know, we can all help each other. You know, we all have a gift to give to each other. You know, just being that friend when, you know, a person is down. It's like we all have our down days, you know, and it's all equal. There's no one person that is a savior or group. But if we work together, you know, we can lift each other up when we need it. We can offer, you know, great wisdom if it's asked for, you know, for assistance, you know, all that nice community vibe that we can create. But, you know, it's just important that we count on ourselves a little bit. And encourage one another to do that. So our light energy actually does kill AI parasites. It seems like, you know, what are we going to do if we're loaded up with this kind of crap and we've got implants and this and that? And it doesn't negate the dark. The dark's important, but light energy is just a high vibration. You know, parasites can't stand balance. They can't stand pure energy. You know, they like to feed. They like to, you know, it's something obvious in the physical plane. When we have a meal that we cooked, we're not going to get upset that we have dishes to clean unless we're really tired. We might put it off for a little bit. But we know that if we create something, there's a byproduct. There's dirty dishes. There's food to be cleaned. We got to wipe the counters. It's just the way it goes. Because if we want to create a meal the next day, we're not going to want to do it on top of a bunch of food where flies have attracted themselves and maybe even mice and a bunch of dirty dishes. It's like, it's not going to be fun to make the next meal. It's going to, you know, and if we ignore it, then the dishes pile up and the dishes pile up. And if you're like me, who is a single parent, if they pile up too much, I just threw them out and bought new dishes. I'm like, I didn't even want to clean these. This is just, forget it. Because, you know, I was working full-time, single parent, whatever. I don't even know why I said that. But, you know, it's obvious on the physical plane when something needs maintenance. It's obvious. It's like organization. We can see it with our eyes, but we don't pay much attention when it's energetic, when it's mental, emotional, or spiritual. We don't know when accumulation is getting to the point of blocking us, creating, you know, an accumulation in our energy bodies, in our energy meridians, because we can't see it. But yet when it's physical, it's obvious, it's easy. So we just need to tune in and be like, okay, is there an overaccumulation of mental stress, of belief systems about ourselves that aren't healthy for us, maybe about somebody else? It's just, we need to maintain all the elementals, not just the physical, because we're physical, emotional, spiritual. We got many bodies to us that require maintenance. And when we can clear out the old, we can create new. If there's accumulation, we're dragging the past with us. We're dragging the accumulation with us, and that's part of why we keep looping. It's really hard to create fresh if again, there's dirty dishes in the sink. So the original intention was to challenge us with adversity until we would wake up and have right use of power, but it got out of control. I mean, there was a purpose virus that was implanted in this world to help us learn the right use of power in this free will universe. You know, there was some sort of sense to it all. But anyway, let's get to the good news, because here we are. We're in the natural cycles when this natural stargates open, called the stellar activation cycle. We're currently in this window. Planetary body, being in alignment with the galactic plane, is merging the galactic cores of Andromeda and Milky Way, and is opening us up to the rest of all that we are. So the attacks, even though they might still be there, are going to fall away a lot easier. Just like when we see false flags or things happen in the news, there's groups of people that are just breaking it down, breaking it apart, seeing all the anomalies, seeing all the reasons why it's not legitimate and it's not real news. We hear enough about fake news, and it's just so many people are on top of it, so many channels. Even if there's censorship, there's always a way around censorship. There's always a new platform or a way to get your message out. And they keep shooting themselves in the foot by trying to silence people. So it's a storm that cannot be stopped. So there have been different genetic hosting races of the Earth's ascension for the last 35,000 years, and it didn't go so well. I talked a bit about just patriarchy, that programming and infiltration. But as of 2009, 2012, our planet went beyond this to prepare for the return of the 13th gate pillar of Mother Arc. We will feel into the mother energy more and more and recognize that power within ourselves. Basically, it's like a chakra lighting up, but it's also a location on this planet because the Earth grids and the stargates and everything is a replica of our own DNA and chakra system. It's based on the elements, our DNA connection to the elements and the earth grids, and the presence of the 13th sign of the zodiac that the sun began to move through in 2010. It's the only astrological sign ruled by the ether. So it's just another indication of something happening. Because if the hosting of the Ascension Timeline shifted in 2009, 2012, and the sun happened to move through the 13th sign of the zodiac, that's pretty good indication that something did take place. And if you study what that sign is all about, it's the only zodiac sign that's actually associated with the ether. So the 13th sign of Fiacus, alchemical theme is unification and wound healing. It's actually an astrological sign that's not ruled by a planet, but it's ruled by Chiron, the wounded healer. So when people are like, well, how do I get in touch with this? Well, first, it's really good to just connect with the earth, knowing it's not just an earth. It's like a consciousness, and it's vibrating, and it's increasing its vibration to help us to be activated. The Chiron energy is all about the wounded healer, right? So a lot of people that are really great at healing others tend to be struggling with their own wounds. They can identify with other people's wounds. They have the compassion, but it doesn't mean that they are all fixed themselves, but that's kind of the whole idea of the wounded healer. And so the mother energy is, you know, the wounded element of ourselves, and so is the masculine, of course, because I never think of the mother without the father, but the emphasis on the mother right now is because that's the thing that's been sort of in the underworld and kept in darkness, so it's just important to bring it to the light, because it actually will heal the masculine also and help clear the programming so that they can get in touch with that side just as much as we come out of the underworld, we get in touch with our warrior energy. So it's just really circulation, not so much, you know, getting all, you know, gender confused. So anyway, this phase is the solar alignment with the cosmic ether, which is at the core of the galactic center, which represents pouring of healing spiritual waters into the earth and humanity from Mother God. Now, those words I know are trigger words. Even the word God, even saying Jesus now is like, you never know what's going to happen. But, you know, it's the mother energy. It's a part of us. It's just a part of just creation, right? So anyway, ether is something that hasn't been available. If we look at the dark mother reversal energies, satanic ritual abuse, and the whole symbolism of the upside down pentagram, the ether has gone into the ground. And physicality has held dominion. That's why there's been survival injustices, physical ailments, epidemics, is that the physical has overridden our connection with spirit. Now that everything is shifting, spirit will recognize, holds dominion over physical matter, and with that connection and through intention and through keeping our creative channels clear, we can alter the physical over the course of time. So if we are programmed, we draw in AI signals, which takes us into that transhumanism trap. If we're focused on our spiritual path and being sovereign, I did say this before, we draw in organic ascension energies. And really, you know, what that means, I just feel is just, you know, general integrity and kindness and all those, you know, virtues that it doesn't have to be, you know, that complicated. So I started to talk a little bit about Saturn. The lower level is dominator, controller, matrix, and dark agendas. And then sort of the intermediary would be limitations, rules, and responsibilities. That's more the human sphere. We work with the law of structure. But when we work with the law of structure, we have to determine, is it repressing us? Is it holding us back? Or is it actually a discipline that can help us to thrive? So we have to take the upper hand at times and say, that doesn't work for me. That rule or that system is blocking, it's repressive. And then when we're moving into teacher-master, we can find disciplines that serve us. Maybe it's something that we do every morning. You know, maybe it's some kind of routine that makes us feel healthy and good, to allow this container to be a container for these higher energies to come through and create activations. So we can enlighten Saturn through our own work by determining what outer authority structures have gotten in our way and what disciplines, because we have to work with the law of structure in this time, what can we work with to, you know, help us to thrive. So some people do yoga, some people want to go for a walk every day, some people change, you know, things about their lifestyle, and some, you know, are you know, just trying to kind of, you know, figure it out. But that's part of the process, is to get out of the old system of control and determine a structure that works for you, works for your body. It has been recently observed that the solar system Stargate 7, located inside the planet Saturn, was also transmitting artificial intelligence beams through the moon that corrupted the ultraviolet wave spectrum in our planetary magnetosphere. And again, that's a quote from Lisa. So Stargate 7, if we look at the 7 chakras, how we've been limited, we look at the demiurge and just being in somewhat this quarantine, only really given access to the knowledge of 7 chakras. It's interesting that Stargate 7 is located inside the planet Saturn, there's also a location on Earth as well. So renowned Russian Jewish scholar Immanuel Velikovsky was one of the first thinkers to postulate that in the earliest recorded epoch, Saturn used to be the main celestial body in the sky that was closest to the Earth. This is confirmed by various other ancient civilizations. Then a cataclysmic catastrophe occurred that caused an explosion which darkened Saturn and turned it into a negative force, while reconfiguring the planets in our current solar system and bringing the current sun closer to Earth. In ancient times and contemporary occultist circles, it is known as the Old Sun, the Dark Lord. It may be that all or most of the ancient sun gods are gods of Saturn's sun. And so this website, this woman, Jessica Lolino, connected a bunch of dots about Saturn that I found. From the guardian host perspective, states that the Baphomet is a satanic field in the earth that is essentially the satanic ritual abuse of the Holy Mother's Cathar body, holding her hostage by binding her body into the earth through demonic forces to produce the Dark Mother. This is the source of ancient pain held in the planetary body when we lost our true mother, and it is felt in all lineages of the Holy Mother, the Cathar lines, the Mary Magdalene, Sophias. And so we all have that in us to a certain degree. That ancient pain can be very masked and forgotten and denied and locked away, far, far away in our unconscious. And so different things, happen, maybe, health crises or things that we grab onto in the physical realm to just kind of like help, deal with that, level of pain of what, has happened. Because this is not the fullness of our mother energy. We got the cosmic mother, we got kind of, we hear about Hecate and some of the underworld energies, and we hear about the earth mothers. Those fragmentations have a lot to do with the exploded planets in the asteroid belts. If you look at the names of asteroids, they have names of like goddesses like Juno, Vesta, Persephone. So there are a lot of these fragmented. So going on that journey into the underworld and out again is a way to like rebuild our masculine and feminine and unscramble the DNA. So these are just archetypes, right? So anyway, when we look at, and Brad Adronis was talking about this, when we look at the energies of Satan, it's actually it's a reversal of the planetary energies and our own to keep us in a digression, to keep us from ascending. And it's kind of like, putting it in chains. And so these ritual abuses and this symbolism is basically saying, the mother is gone. She wasn't even able to be here, but a portion of her being has been locked into this sort of hostage, binding a portion of her body. And so again, that's just a portion. So when we do that journey, we're the bridge between the higher and lower worlds are able to reconnect. So because Saturn isn't made good without our willingness to do alchemy, we need to know that our salvation is taking on the task of becoming masters, not controllers, not victims of enslavement. It doesn't mean that, we don't go through that and experience it, though. We either are under the rulership of Saturn, or we become the controller like Saturn, or we change the energy of Saturn, which is the willingness to be on a path of mastery. And it is where we can become a true guide, because the higher levels of Saturn are teacher, master. But not like master as in like ego master, but like master as in mastery over these lower forces. Somebody that's able to guide others. I look at it like an expedition leader, because I always have these metaphors, because that's my background. You don't know how to lead somebody through the wilderness unless you've survived the storms, unless you understand the poisonous creatures that are surrounding, because you're not going to be well trained if you only studied or became good at it because it was sunny every day and the snakes were in their holes, or it never stormed. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a really good expedition leader because every day that I trained, it was a wonderful day, never ran into a snake, so hey, let me take you guys out. No, you have to the best way to become an expert in anything is to face the storms, the creatures, everything that could possibly compromise you and harm you, and overcome it so that you can bring people in and say, here's some techniques and ways to handle it. It's like we can't get rid of the mosquito population, but there are ways to protect ourselves with maybe a fly net, maybe some special nice essential oil. We are able to learn skills and abilities to modify the things that we don't have a whole lot of control over. So anyway, it clears our emotional water so that we can connect to lunar forces that aren't so dominated and manipulated. So there's higher octaves of the lunar energy. The lower one is still this imbalance of the Saturn-Moon Matrix, where our emotions are kind of all over the place, and we're dealing with, the programmings of Saturn. We can go into these higher octaves of the lunar energy, and eventually we're not even going to have to work so hard at it. But But we have to be somewhat, immune to it. And part of that is going through it and getting to the other side. So the power of our intuition in clear waters of clear psychic seeing is the higher level of the lunar energy. Pluto in Capricorn is going to be in a perfect conjunction in 2020, January 2020. Pluto in Capricorn is allowing this long-awaited alchemy to occur with Saturn. So Saturn and Pluto conjunct each other is really, really helpful. And what's wonderful is all the things that we have to do is happening on a cosmic and earthly level. The thing is, though, we want to connect with the organic elements of it, not how it's streamed through the media and how they're going to use these planetary energies to work their agendas, because they know how to work with all this kind of stuff. They've used dark technologies to manipulate the earth grids. They wait for certain times of the year to do certain rituals in order to sabotage. But if we, can understand this and enjoy it just within our own being in connection to earth and cosmos, that's the true reality. Everything else is an overlay matrix. So Pluto in Capricorn is allowing a long-awaited alchemy to occur with Saturn. It shows the dark forces are being exposed as the ether mixes with the lead to turn it into gold. The ether is the quintessence of the mother. It's up to each of us to stand in this process and not be tricked. I feel there are parallel expressions of every planet, and it depends on us to connect with the higher octaves. There are many levels to our perceptions and the way we experience anything. But this is the window period where it's all possible like never before, and we get to do it together or on our own, depending on... It's important to feel safe around certain individuals and develop that, before we just jump into any kind of like, we still kind of in that place. But anyway, because these satanic forces, this is, his perspective, Stephen Flowers, but I found this interesting. Because this satanic force, which it's only satanic because it's all about using the dark mother energy, the womb energy in reversal codes, which is actually what Satanism is, not so much a figure. But because the satanic force betrayed divine mysteries, or because these beings created this that might associate with that name, because this force betrayed divine mysteries to mankind, he has been punished. I believe in the word correction, not punishment. But his dark, heavy, laden qualities must be transformed into gold by the magician in an alchemical process involving the repolarization of lights. So we hear Seth, Satan, Molech, or Saturn is the lord of hell and the very god who rules over money and wealth. So I wouldn't word it like that, but it's just interesting because I was, talking about the alchemy. It's just another way to kind of see it. And when we look at Molech or the Khazarian Mafia or some things connected to the Cabal, this is kind of what they're feeding. When we look at like ritual abuse and stuff, they're trying to feed this, and it actually connects into, hold on, I'll get to that. Okay, so I don't know how much time I have, and I don't want to spend time too much on, anyway, the Grail, Peter Farley, very interesting writings from this guy. The Grail has been identified with alchemy, the science of concentrating vital currents and life forces. In the time of the Catholic Inquisition, alchemists were careful to veil their art. They said it was to turn base metals into gold. In philosophical and metaphysical terms, the alchemists were more concerned with the transformation of the worldly person, lead, into a spiritually illuminated person, gold. Just as gold was tried and tested in the fire, so the human spirit was tried in the crucible of life. And the agent for this illumination was perceived to be the Holy Spirit. And so that's why in my little resume, life experience is my #1 teacher, because we're tried and tested in this human experience all the time. And so if we look at the tarot, the death card is actually the number 13, and 13 is one of those numbers. So if we think about, okay, reconnecting to the mother, we look at the 13 families that have basically hijacked. They took the 13th floor off of most elevators. So every time I see a 13th floor, I'm like, yes. Very often you won't see one, but now it's like they're just coming back like a Mandela effect. It's like the 13th floors now at a lot of hotels. But death, 13th trump or major arcana, is the most traditional, of the most traditional tarot deck. It's used in tarot, whatever. So death being 13, 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 actually represents the Cancer house, the moon in the zodiac, but it's actually the emperor in the tarot. So you see the masculine and feminine right there, which shows, they're a lot more integrated if we look at it numerologically. So unlikely that this card actually represents a physical death. Typically, it implies an end, possibly of a relationship or interest, therefore implies an increased sense of self-awareness. Upright, sometimes ending, severe illness, profound change, letting go of attachments, failure, mortality. I wouldn't word it like this. It's very much an old sort of deck, but reversal, living unaware, depression, long-term illness, because it's like you're being trapped in the birth canal. If it's upside down, it means that you're locked in the cocoon. It's really hard to get out. First of all, we don't have any support in these initiations, mostly in our society. And so it's very easy to not follow through the transformation and be locked into something for quite some time. But the ruling planet is Pluto, and because Pluto is next to Saturn, it's important that we realize that the old Saturn's dying and the new Saturn is being birthed. And we're going through all these different things connected to how we relate to the law of structure. And when we understand that the physical body holds the law of structure, we can determine what is best for us individually in order to thrive. And it's really on our own terms, not rules. But the core energy of this earth is a diamond heart, and it was anchored back into the earth only recently. It's way more powerful than the black cube harvesting tank in the core of Saturn that blood rituals actually feed. Every planet has a shadow side, and we all contend with Saturn no matter what our chart is. But the way to take down satanic forces is to bring love and awareness into our daily lives and refuse the AI mind control that comes from its infiltrating matrix. Saturn rules the law of structure and things related to our physical body. The Saturn-Satan part is just something to feed how we relate to the law of structure through mind control, through manipulating our emotions so that we're in a sort of survival state of desperation and we need something always outside of ourselves to appease it. Because we lost our mother for so long that we're looking for anything else to appease that sense of loss. But now that the mother's returned, it's going to be a lot easier to overcome this. So part of a Russian team, Dr. Garajavak, I know I said that wrong, found the airwaves could facilitate total genetic restructuring. Even David Icke believes we take the Saturn frequency into this 98% of our DNA, and it's coded with messages. These messages are designed to control and limit us into being orderly drones. Icke further believes that the moon is an artificial construct which was made to amplify the frequency band of the Saturn-Sun matrix on Earth. And again, the same person pulled some of this together. But so according to David Icke, the rings of Saturn are a massive broadcast system broadcasting a fake reality. DNA holds all the information we will ever need to build and maintain the human body. Researchers at Boston University and Harvard Medical School studied the 98% of our DNA that remains unable to be decoded is called trash DNA. DNA unplugged means our memory's been erased. DNA damage began about 5,500 years ago when the Babylon Sumer invasion took place. It erased DNA memories, race memories at Stonehenge. That's where the Nephilim reversal grid was placed because that's where the ley lines of the masculine and feminine are really strong that go into Glastonbury. Unplug those, and then we're just in this lower DNA expression. It blocked life force and kundalini, natural flow, glands, pineal, pituitary, hypothalamus, and thyroid, which are all connected to the stargates as well. So that's why Chinese medicine really understands pressure points and reflexology because all our organs are on our feet. So when you actually massage your feet and work some of these places, you're actually helping to clear stargates and blocked energies on the planet. And I wanted to break it down where I knew, what location I was massaging. It's like Greece and Titicaca's right on my lower back or somewhere, because those are stargates. But literally, there must be somebody who is creating some kind of map that corresponds everything about the physical body. If I had the kind of time, I'd be the person that would want to, but anyway, so shortened lifespan, damaged immunity, setting up for recycling of the astral 4D, and we keep coming back. But we feel a victim to it, but at the same time, we're learning something. We're learning to overcome it. Every time we, experience, a human incarnation, we learn to get past that false light or whatever. So, I mean, it's just a temporary thing to help us just to realize, how we're being played. So the scrambled geometric codes and morphogenetic fields blocked multidimensional perception, rewrote human history from 5,500 years at the time of invasion, patriarchal domination and enslavement agenda for Earth humans. That is basically meant to culminate around this window period that we're in, that this would be the New World Order time. This time that has been prophesized as a time of ascending and advancing has been a projected time of Armageddon, apocalyptic events, and New World Order. So transfiguration corresponds to the element of solar fire, which burns away the shadow forms in the lower chakra centers. The lunar forces of the moon, connected to the dark mother, the lower shadow forms start to rise in our body to be consumed in this transfiguring solar fire. Planetary and human DNA is activated through communicating with intelligent plasma emitted from the sun through solar flares and coronal mass ejections. So when people say, the return of Christ, I just see it as the return of this solar energy that is helping those underworld aspects come to the light to correct the dark reversals and to bring those elements of the divine feminine that has been in the underworld to come out of the darkness and to realign with that Christ consciousness so that we can activate that divine blueprint, which is going to switch on our dormant strands of DNA and resolve the junk DNA. So healing our damaged DNA is actually healing thousands of years of imbalance that has turned into health issues and conditions. If we can create balance and harmony and understand our inner self, the elements that we are made of, and the ether that is now available to us, which purifies, we can absolutely heal damaged DNA. However long it takes is however long it takes, though. Each strand is composed of 12 base magnetic Mayan female codes and 12 base electrical male acceleration codes, like a replica of the Earth grids. They have been split apart, and the imbalance blocks us from accessing the rest of ourselves. It is the lid of Saturn we need to lift, the programs that we need to dissolve and embrace the true love story and divorce ourselves from the imposters and negative belief systems. Let me just get a time check, because I don't want to run into your time. Oh, okay. So the original human DNA pattern is arranged into 12-dimensionalized mathematical programs, each of which set the blueprint for one DNA strand. Each strand is composed of 12 base magnetic, female codes, 12 base electrical, male acceleration codes. So the Earth grids are actually electric magnetic, and they're broken up actually into the elements, including ether. And I didn't actually include all that, but I did include 12 tribes, 12 strands of DNA, 12 stargates. These are the locations on Earth. And then you got the 13th stargate, which is actually Uluru, Australia. And so that location goes right down into the core of the planet. And so as it's now activating as a diamond heart, when it hits that particular location, it impacts all the Earth grids. It's like circulatory system. Like when we activate a chakra, it runs through our nervous system. It changes the composition of our blood and how it can purify our blood. But these are the actual physical locations. So some people feel drawn to go to certain areas of the world without realizing that they might be there specifically to do energy work. And I know I was talking, I think, with you about locations in Florida, and there's a really powerful Stargate there in Florida, which actually links to Jerusalem. So, you know, it's sort of like if you touch a pressure point on a part of your body, it can actually, you know, certain points can, down here, can be for gallbladder, like in a different location. So grid workers and people that have, you know, been working these energies do a lot in these particular spots to correct some of the infiltrations. And some, you know, even come from beings like the Leviathans that completely had the Sarasota Stargate all blocked up. And so that clogging of the grids and stargates are why it's been so difficult for us to recover. So ley lines are the meridian axitonial lines or grid system that conducts and transmits frequencies throughout our bodies and the planet. They are an exact mirror of our energy body, DNA, and chakras. All of this is built upon sacred geometry, things like platonic solids, but they can be thrown into reversals or manipulated. The first four shapes correspond with the elements: earth, hexahedron, air, octahedron, fire, tetrahedron, and water, icosahedron, with the fifth dodecahedron representing heaven, ether, or the universe. So the grid description, which I just said, completes the global grid, which relates to the ley lines and relates to the magnetic and electric. But there have been reversals. It's called a reversal 55, put on the dodecahedron, which is the ether. So when we look at the symbology of the inverted pentagram and the fifth element going into the ground, and the dark mother reversals, that's so that we don't have the energy circulation with ether, which allows our physical bodies to heal, which allows our consciousness to open up, which is why it's been so difficult for the last 26,000 years. Plus all these world wars and all these different things taking place, you know, have traumatized us to the point where we have not had that access. And so a lot of different lower forces have disguised themselves as imposters to, you know, give us a sense of like being on, you know, a spiritual path. And to some degree, a lot of it has helped, but to the same token, you know, some of it has been, you know, highly compromised. But our DNA proteins are also a mirror of this. In DNA, the nitrogenous base is made of nucleic acids: cytosine, guanine, adenine, and thymine. Metaphysically, each of these nucleic acids is connected to the elemental substance of the planet as air, water, fire, and earth. When we pollute these four elements on the earth, we pollute the corresponding nucleic acids in our DNA. So it's really obvious. How much? More time? Am I done? Okay. Okay, I'm wrapping it up. So, you know, so we see the contamination in the outer elements, and so we're doing the healing. And both DNA and RNA, the mitochondrial DNA serves as the fifth principle of cosmic ether, which is sourced only from the mother. And that's what we're connecting with. And astrology can be helpful. I'm mostly focused on medical astrology. How does it relate to the organs? How does it relate to your physical health? What aspects are making certain organs like compromised or certain energy blocks happen. So I like to look at astrology from a medical standpoint instead of just, other things. So that's, the full model. I talked about it yesterday. These are the higher frequencies connected to the mother arc, which is now finally in the planet. These are different levels of energy that we can, notice, like our energy drops when we're in those lower vibrations of shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear. And then, we raise the vibration as we allow our perception to give us like greater insights and greater wisdom to not just be floating around those lesser layers, but it's okay to go into those zones as long as we can pull ourselves out. That's part of the alchemy. And that's the full chakra system. We have much more than the 7 that we are taught. Light symbol codes direct the pattern of frequency into the DNA, which activate dormant levels of DNA. Things like sound healing are helpful. But the most important thing to know, which is, I'm wrapping it up here, is that the Venus transits have been creating a patterning in the sky of a pentagram. And the 5th element coming in, the Venus transits have helped to lift the pentagram back up to connect with the ether. In 2010, when the sun moved through Ophiuchus, which is the only zodiac sign ruled by the ether, that's when the mother energy was able to drop back into the planet, vibrating as a diamond sun, healing the earth grids, healing our own DNA and our own energy bodies. And if we can stay clear of the distractions and the mind control and all these different attempts to infect our creative energy with belief systems and propagandas that we might generate as a reality because we believe in it, that's the only thing we need to watch out for, because it's a cosmic and earthly event that has been prophesized, it's happening, it's real, and even astrologers and astronomers, have taken note of the fact that a sacred geometry of a rose is being created. But this is heavy right now because we're going through a global detox because of all this. So don't expect that it's going to be all easy. Just keep flushing, keep flushing. We don't have to look at the puke, just keep flushing. And just, know that it's time to claim victory and have a good time together with each other. And thank you so much, because coming to these events is just a chance for us to unite.